Hello friends. This is God of Fiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Naruto awaken the power of nine-tailed demon and get married with Urza Scarlet. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. The late afternoon sun shone brightly at the top of the cloudless blue sky, sending its rays down onto the village hidden in the leaves. Said village went by many names, but no matter what you called it, certain things always remained a fact. It was a ninja village. It was in fact the Fire Country's, one of the 5 great elemental nations' only ninja village. The village itself was surrounded by a gigantic wall, no doubt built to protect it against any enemy invaders, separating the structures from what can only be described as a vast forest, which was surrounding it on all fronts. The hidden leaf had several giant gates, which served both as an entrance and an exit for anyone who wished to visit or leave. There was only one spot which wasn't covered by the wall, primarily the reason for that being an enormous cliff overlooking the village in its place. On the cliff, there were 4 faces of men carved into the rock. From left to right, they were the faces of Hashirama Senju, Tobirama Senju, Hiruzen Sarutobi and Minato Namikaze. The faces of the 4 Hokage. 1. Beloved leaders of the village, renowned as some of the greatest ninja to have lived. Or in the case of Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage, to still live. The heads of the 1st through 4th, carved the way they were, seemed as if they were watching over the people of the village hidden in the leaves. If you imagined it, you could see pride, happiness and hope for their home and their people. Today though. Today you would see disappointment. 10th of October. The day the 9-tailed demon fox unexpectedly attacked the village, causing destruction and death along its path. The day Minato Namikaze, exceptional ninja, leader and hero, gave his life to protect the village and its people, defeating the vile demon in the process. Or that was the official story. The truth was much crueler. The 4th Hokage did sacrifice his life, but it wasn't a sacrifice to defeat the demon, for even as powerful as he was unable to manage such a feat. Minato gave his life away, using a forbidden technique to seal the demon into the body of a newborn baby, making it the cage of the 9-tailed demon fox. And herein was the cause of the disappointment of the great ninja leaders. Instead of being seen as a hero and enjoying himself at the festival taking place in celebration of the fox's defeat, the jailer of the demon, this child, was spending his birthday alone. Naruto Uzumaki, recently turned 7 years old, sat atop the head of the 4th Hokage, his idol. His cerulean eyes looked over the village where festivities were currently taking place, where people would go around happily enjoying themselves. The village that hated him, the village that ignored him, without even letting him know of the reason. All Naruto Uzumaki knew was that he was alone, without parents, without siblings, that there was no one to support him and spend his birthday with him. Letting out a strained and audible sigh, he turned his tear-filled eyes away from the village, slowly standing up and walking away. Naruto had shorter than average height for a boy his age. He had blonde, spiky hair which boasted a mind of its own, since no amount of combing would ever be enough to make it submit. He wore a white t-shirt with an orange swirl at the front and green baggy shorts, with blue sandals on his feet. But the most characteristic feature of the 7-year-old boy was what looked like whiskers marks, 3 on each cheek right below his beautiful cerulean orbs. Not sparing another glance at the village, Naruto began his slow and void of energy walk towards his solitary home. A lone cloaked figure made its way along an old, forgotten path. It led to the edge of some cliffs, overlooking the great ocean. The sound of the violent waves crashing into the rocks, shipping them away and dispersing countless water droplets into the air, could be heard from afar. As the figure continued down the path, he started descending lower and lower, coming close to the raging waters until he reached the end, right at the edge of a steep cliff. He took a large whiff of the air, and as the smell of the ocean itself invaded his lungs, he released it in an audible sigh. He looked in front of him and smiled. There was nothing but the wild waves and a few clouds in the late afternoon sky ahead. Indeed, his group's resident illusionist was very skilled. He lifted his arm slowly as it began to glow in a faint green light. He stretched it in front of him, above his head, seemingly at the nothingness that lied in the ocean, and waved it. After the 3rd wave, the area started to get distorted as a small magical circle appeared in the air, and by the 5th it had already completely changed. Now the old path didn't end abruptly, but it continued upwards onto a rocky headland. Now, it could be clearly seen that it led to what looked like an ancient keep. Blair Maguire smiled as he continued walking ahead. Such a large-scale permanent illusion would be hard to pull off even for a master illusionist of her caliber. Luckily, illusions weren't her only forte, and with the aid of some well-placed runes, she was able to not only cast it, but keep it sustained at the cost of relatively small amount of magical power. The cloaked man absent-mindedly made a curve to the right, still following the same path. He soon reached stair steps that led up towards the remains of a now ruined wall with a disintegrating from the old age wooden gate. The wall was built right between two large cliffs, which would get the defenders quite the advantage over any army stupid enough to try and attack the gate head-on. Indeed, the keep was built in a very strategic location by his ancestors. Well, they couldn't be considered his ancestors really. Blair Maguire, or rather the body of Blair Maguire, had the appearance of taller than average man, with blue-green eyes and red-orange curly hair and beard. He had large muscled arms and even larger chest and stomach. Beneath his black cloak, he wore a white buttoned t-shirt, blue pants, leather boots and a leather belt around his waist. Of course, he didn't really look like that. This was merely the appearance of the body he had possessed. As he moved past the gate and continued towards the plaza, his hand absently brushed over the leather-encased book that was chained to his belt. Leonard, master of dark magic and sorcery, could only be grateful to whoever it was that sent Blair his way and made him pick the book he was sealed in out of curiosity. He still couldn't believe his luck at times and thought he was under an illusion or had gone insane in the confines of that damnable book. And yet, here he was, in the possession of a suitable body, about to perform a ritual that would grant him the power he had lost, the power that he so rightfully deserved. As he reached the plaza, he found himself in front of a large round piece of rock with various runes and circles painted on it, with the whole pentagram stretching outside and all around it, drawn on the grass-less ground. Yet that wasn't the only thing that greeted him. The other 4 members of their small group stood or sat there, preoccupied with various things, while they awaited his arrival. Again, he had to thank whatever luck bestowed him for such useful tools to complete his plan. Of course, it had taken time to find all the right people with enough magical power. But after 2 long years, everything was gathered and was ready for the ritual they had all prepared. His eyes moved onto each of his cloaked companions. Or rather, some were cloaked. In the case of 2 particular individuals, there was definitely not enough clothing to be even barely considered DD at a man known as Cornelius Wright. He was a fat, short man, with black curly hair. He had tanned skin and brown, almost black squinty eyes. His round nose and big mouth only reinforced the pigly impression he gave off. Although, not as much as the smell. At times, Leonard was sure the vile thing had a mind of its own. He sometimes wondered what amount of poor hygiene would it take to give birth to a spawn like that, no matter how much Cornelius claimed the stench came from his potions. Indeed, Cornelius Wright was a potions mage, utilizing various alchemical mixtures and infusing them with his magical power to produce varying effects from creatures made from poison or acid to different degrees of explosion. The Black Mage actually had suspicion that the stench was the product of an accident with Cornelius' potions and the poor hygiene. And he was certain the fat man used it as a weapon, which made him a fearsome man indeed. His reason for being here was simple: greed. He had a lot of money and he wanted more money. And he believed that he would obtain vast riches after acquiring more power. He was exactly what Leonard had needed, because funding this little operation was quite financially taxing, and despite all of his complaints at spending his precious wealth, Cornelius had provided. As for clothing, the few instances Leonard saw him without the cloak, he wore light blue robes and yellow pointy shoes. The Stenchmaster made it a point to wear the cloak most of the time, after the ramblings of the insane member of their group. Blair's possessed eyes moved onto said member, Peter Sleek. A man very well defined by his name. He had pale skin with long black oily hair. Wrinkles marred his white face, around his yellow eyes and at the edges of his darkened lips, signifying he was probably in his mid-40s. Those weren't the only things surrounding his mouth, as he had a thin black goatee, extending a bit below his chin. This sorcerer practiced a forbidden and dangerous aspect of magic: necromancy. More specifically, he had an aptitude for soul-stealing. It was an atrocious magic, but Leonard needed it. He hadn't shared this little piece of information with the others, But a few souls were needed for the ritual as well, and he wasn't willing to sacrifice his companions. Oh, not that he was feeling sentimental or anything hilarious like that. No, he needed their substantial magical power for the ritual, something you can't use when you don't have a soul. Snapping from his inner musings, Leonard continued observing the necromancer. Sleek's unusual choice in magical arts more than accounted for his attire. Beneath the ever-present cloak, he wore a dark violet robe. Over it he had what looked like chest armor, made from white bones. He had the same type of armor over his forearms and tights and wore boots made of the same material, which was bones. He wore a belt around his waist, made of skulls, which gave the overall impression the man was obsessed with the human skeleton. Most likely not in a healthy way. The necromancer's reason for participation was simple as well. He was getting old and he wanted immortality. And he believed the ritual would help him obtain power to achieve his ridiculous dream. Who knows, maybe it would have. Leonard let out a sigh as he moved on to the next half of the group. The half behind the reason for most of Sleek's insane ramblings. He looked at a scarcely clad man, going by the name of Babajide. He had lean muscular body and dark skin. His head was bald and he had brown chocolate eyes. Various tribal markings were painted over his face in white, continuing down his neck and onto his chest. The reason the dark sorcerer could see that was because Babajide only wore what looked like a leopard pelt around his waist. He was barefooted as well, although there were pieces of leopard pelt around his ankles as well, going up to his knees. Around his waist pelt, there were various trinkets, amulets and cylinders, as well as a medium-sized pouch strapped to his back, no doubt filled with things needed for the purpose of helping him with his strange magic. Babajide was a witch doctor, or at least, once was one. Now he had progressed beyond the healing purposes of his art into the sphere of witchcraft itself. The reason behind what prompted that change was the same reason he was a part of their group. Vengeance. The red-haired man didn't know the whole details, not because of Babajide's unwillingness to share them, but more because of the strange way the dark-skinned man spoke. From what he had gathered, the witch doctor's tribe had been captured and sacrificed one night, him being the only one managing to escape. Leonard mused, seeing something like that would probably make any man seek revenge. Not that he cared, although he supposed he should be happy for it, since that was the reason Babajide was with them. And his expertise in dark rituals was without a doubt a great help. Most of the group's companions had simple reasons for being a part of their modest gathering. Greed. Immortality. Vengeance. Leonard had to confess, even his reason was simple. He wanted power to restore himself to his former glory. But he wasn't sure about the reasons of the group's final member, something that worried him a bit. Shaking his head lightly, he set his gaze over the only female present in the plaza. There on one of the many mossy stones, in all her beauty, laid Morgana. Leaning on her elbows, she observed the interactions of the others with apparent apathy until she turned her gaze towards the newcomer. Morgana was in every definition of the word a gorgeous fair-skinned woman. Her beautiful raven hair went down her bare back, with 2 strands held in 4 small bronze cylinders, 2 longer above, 2 shorter, as they fell on the sides of her bewitching face. An intense gaze was the product of soft silver eyes, and her lips were touched with royal purple lipstick. Her clothing consisted of a large bronze belt strapped tightly around her slender waist, with the front being a big circle, positioned over her flat stomach. From the circle, 2 pieces of silky royal purple cloth stretched over her chest, joining behind her neck, barely covering her large breasts. The other ends of the cloth wrapped around her waist underneath the belt and fell loosely, completing the dress, over her long legs with a slit starting right above her right thigh. She had 3 large bronze ring bracelets over each wrist, miraculously not falling down from her hands, no matter how much she moved them. The cylinders, the bracelets and the belt all had different runes and markings etched upon them, although they were barely visible on the thin bracelets. Amber-colored tattoos and signs were drawn on her wrists, her bare shoulders, her back and her outer tights. She also wore amber-colored high-heeled sandals with Roman-style straps going criss-cross up to her knees. Despite himself, even Leonard had to admit he was sometimes mesmerized by the beauty and power emanating from this woman. She was a master illusionist, capable of even creating solid illusions at times. He wasn't sure of her other abilities, since she wasn't of the sharing around the campfire type, but he at least knew she had some ability with runes, since she had helped with the preparations of the ritual. Besides, only an idiot would think the runes over the bronze jewelry she wore were purely for decoration. And she was after all the one responsible for the large-scale illusion that hid their base of operations so well. Without her, their whole quest wouldn't have gone so unnoticed. Nevertheless, Leonard was worried. He needed someone with mastery over illusions, and those mages were quite rare. He had heard of her being a powerful mage, constantly working and training herself into the ground, plunging into countless hours of research, all for obtaining recognition from her peers, not only as a female mage, but as an illusionist as well. So he thought maybe offering her power would make her join his cause. She had listened to him intently, the night he sought her at a bar after me assignment. She had remained silent for a while afterwards, and Leonard was getting worried he had made a mistake and would have to kill her, causing unwanted attention towards him. Not to mention, powerful as he was, even he wasn't sure he would be able to defeat her in his current body. But to his relief she had agreed. That still didn't mean he wasn't worried or suspicious. Morgana had stated that she was working towards the highest form of illusion magic, turning an illusion into reality permanently, without the need of constant magical power for sustenance. Something didn't seem quite right to Leonard though. He wasn't a practitioner of the art himself, but he knew such a feat shouldn't be about power alone. It was about changing the mechanics of the world, and for that, knowledge and technique were needed much more than vast quantities of raw magical energy, something she had quite a lot of anyway. But he needed her. Not to mention he really didn't know anything about illusions, so he didn't let his paranoia rule him too much. And he wasn't that worried, since he would properly dispose of her anyway. He would properly dispose of them all after tonight. Leonard decided to let his presence be known, as he removed his hood and cleared his throat audibly. That got the rest of the group's attention, since he already had Morgana's. Finally, Cornelius was the first to speak, or rather shout. "We've been waiting for you for a while now, what took you?" The dark sorcerer spared a glance at him. There were some complications with the final lacrima crystal. It was better guarded than I initially expected. Cornelius grunted. "Fine. Let's get started. I want to get over with this so we can all be on our way doing our thing." Leonard barely nodded as he moved towards a heap of lacrima crystals. Taking out a pouch from underneath his robe, he took out a blue orb the size of a bowling ball. It could be clearly seen it was charged quite densely with magic. The energies pulsated and flickered in it, as the red-haired mage put it carefully next to other such crystals. There weren't that many such densely powered lacrima around Fury, although they weren't rare. The scale of the magical energies they packed still warranted some sort of protection. Especially since his group started to move recently to rapidly collect 120 of them, which was still a fifth of their total number. They went unnoticed at first since they tried using Cornelius' wealth to buy some, but not all of them could be bought, so they had to resolve to theft. At some point some people started piecing the clues together and realized the crystals were specifically targeted. So they had started increasing the guards and the protection. It wasn't that Leonard was unprepared for the increased protection. What caught him by surprise was this time there were mages there as well. Furthermore, it had taken him more time than he had desired to break into the reinforced safe that held the lacrima. It was a good thing this was the last one they needed though. No doubt there would be even more attention at the thefts now that they had turned into murders. As he looked up, he saw the others were starting to make final preparations for the ritual. They inspected the large pentagram circle the whole thing would take place in and were moving the lacrima crystals at their supposed locations. Not wasting any time, he joined them in checking over the runes painted over the round rock as well as the ground, forming into what he considered a work of art in itself. Truly, Leonard was quite proud of his creation. At the edge of the rock you could see black runes inscribed over it forming a circle themselves. From them, 5 lines stretched on the ground, reaching 5 more circles. These were much smaller than the center one, as the purpose behind them was for a person to stand in it, channel magical energies and manipulate the ritual, hence they were called medium circles. All 5 were connected by lines of runes, forming a giant pentagram. On those lines, there were 3 more smaller circles between the larger ones, where 8 lacrima orbs were placed in each, in the form of an octagon, with rune lines connecting each of the crystals. Their raw magical energy would provide the power needed for the ritual, and it was why they were called the storage circles. There were also 2 more runed lines outstretched from each of the medium circles, joining them in what looked like a star. The center of the star, which formed a pentagram of its own, encased the circular rock in the middle perfectly. Between the 5 rays of the drawn star, there were large markings, each having its own purpose. Finally, the whole giant pentagram was encased in a rune circle itself, completing the whole thing. The only place that didn't have any additional markings and runes and seemed rather empty in contrast was the center circle, also known as the summoning circle. For this was the purpose of their 2 long years of preparations, for gathering all the money, all the lacrima, all the souls and all the hard preparations. The ritual pentagram itself had taken him, Babajide and Morgana 3 months to paint and calibrate. It would all help them summon a powerful demon from another plane. A demon they would subdue, purify its raw power and divide it amongst them, or that's what the others believed. Leonard almost chuckled wickedly, as he remembered what he set the circle to actually do. Instead of dividing the power in 5, he would absorb it all, and then he would dispose of his tools. Is everything ready? Leonard's fantasies of murder were put to a halt by Morgana's serious voice. She rarely spoke at their gatherings, which meant this time she was quite eager herself. Ready? No, not at all. There is still something you and Baba need to do, yes. Sleek said with his distinct annoying way of elongating, yes, and, no. At his statement Morgana rolled her eyes, but it was Babajide who spoke. What you be talking, Mon? All the circles be painted and all the crystals be gathered. We be ready for ritual, Mon. Leonard blinked as he deciphered what the bald-muscled man had just said. Not quite. Cornelius decided to join in the conversation. You and Morgana need to put on the cloaks and cover yourselves. Not that I mind Morgana's clothing or lack of it any bit. You could always lose it all if it was up to me. At his last comment he turned a lecherous smile at the sorceress, wagging his brows suggestively. The only female of the group threw a piercing glare at him. Watch it, pig, or I might cause another accident with your potions to increase that vile stench of yours. Maybe this time I would do the world a favor by getting rid of you. But Cornelius is right, yes. We cannot begin the ritual without you putting on your cloaks, no. And why I be needing a cloak, Mon? For protection of course, yes. You wouldn't want the demon to know who you are and seek you out if we fail, no. His buddies might see you as well, yes. Babajide snorted. Mask is all I need, Mon. He spoke as he picked a tribal wooden mask, hanging from his pelt, and put it on his face. It had several paintings in red, white and yellow, as well as a couple of leaves and feathers extending from the top and the sides. I think not, no. You should cover your whole bodies or the demon would know, yes. Especially you, slut. The last comment was of course directed at Morgana, who sent the coldest glare she could manage his way, most likely capable of freezing the sun itself. Which was a wasted effort, since the corpse-loving bastard probably had ice flowing already in that pale-skinned body of his. As she opened her mouth to no doubt send a couple of threats his way with the promise of fulfilling them once their mutual association had finished, Leonard decided it was time to put an end to this. Enough, he said quietly, with menace. Or that was what he intended at least. Leonard almost swore and cursed his body's only flaw in his view. No matter how quiet he tried to be, his booming voice had a different opinion. What infuriated him more was that there was nothing he could do about it. Possessing someone didn't magically change his vocal cords as well. At most, there could be traces of his former voice in his puppets, but nothing more. Seize this foolishness at once, we don't have time for it. Morgana, Babajide, put the damn cloaks so we can start. The others looked at him, doing nothing to hide their smirks. Leonard cursed yet again. Of course, such high-class speech didn't have the desired menacing effect with this booming voice, and at most managed to accomplish a comedic reaction. Nevertheless, the scarcely clad mages donned over their cloaks and hoods, and all of them proceeded to take their respective places. Leonard was of course at the top of the star, with his medium circle being the only one that had a wooden podium. He picked the book from his belt and unwrapped it from the leather casing. After all, his actual magical power was in the book and not in this body. He placed it on the podium, opening it at the desired page, before looking at the now orange-colored sky as he noted the sun had begun to set. He looked over his temporary companions. Let us begin. Naruto was walking along a path, overlooking the bank of a small lake. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in a beautiful orange. Soon the day would end, signifying another lonely birthday. His eyes went to the left and he marveled at how beautiful the lake looked now. It was reflecting the setting sun and it had taken the color of the sky. Naruto smiled. A lake of orange underneath a sky of orange. Since it was his favorite color, he thought maybe it was a gift of nature for him on this day. At least he got one. As he continued walking, a small wooden pier came into view. On it sat a boy he immediately recognized. Sasuke Uchiha. He wore a black shirt with the Uchiha clan logo on the back, which was a red and white fan, black shorts and black sandals. He had raven hair and black eyes, giving the impression he had no pupils. He was sitting on the edge, looking absent-mindedly at the far distance. Naruto's expression softened at that. Of course he knew of him. He was an orphan like him. He wasn't always an orphan though. Back when they joined the academy, Naruto didn't have much interactions with him, but he was different from now. He used to be more cheery and smiled from time to time. Now he had cold eyes, filled with solitude and hatred, kind of like his own. That change in behavior happened a month or so ago, when his clan was massacred. He had lost everyone close to him, including his parents. Naruto never had any, so he didn't know what it was to lose. But he knew that now Sasuke was like him. Alone. And even though it was cruel, it made Naruto happy, because now, there was someone who could relate to his pain and maybe share a bond with. If he stopped being stubborn and actually went and talked to the boy. Naruto was suddenly startled from his daze, when the raven-haired boy noticed his presence and turned his head his way. Too surprised for a proper reaction, Naruto unconsciously frowned, prompting a glare from Sasuke. The boys stared at each other for a bit, before both turning their heads away with a huff. Naruto continued on his way towards his apartment, with a huge smile on his face. They would always fight and act like they hated each other, but for Naruto, Sasuke was his first friend, his first connection. He didn't need to turn away, to know the raven-haired boy was also smiling. And he was right. After Naruto had moved on, Sasuke sneaked a small peek at the blonde and noticed his smile. Which immediately prompted one of his own. Naruto may be an idiot, but he wasn't so bad, Sasuke mused. Even though they both shared the same pain, now that he was alone, Sasuke could tell the other boy had it much worse. Naruto had never felt the warmth of a family, the embrace of a mother and the pride of a father, even though Sasuke himself had only recently gotten the last one, right before his father was murdered. Maybe he could swallow his pride for a bit and act nicer to the blonde. Maybe if they became friends, neither would be alone and... A loud scream of pain resonated through the air. Sasuke snapped from his thoughts and immediately jumped to his feet. He turned around, but couldn't see Naruto anymore. He rushed upwards towards the path, searching for the blonde, and froze still at the sight that greeted him. The floor and the walls of the chamber around the cage shook. Small bits started falling off the ceiling. The nine-tailed demon fox opened his eyes as he was woken up from his slumber. He slowly lifted his head, followed by his whole body. He stood on guard as a somewhat familiar feeling set upon him. He felt a distant pulling, as if someone was trying to yank him. As if someone tried to summon him. At this sudden realization, the fox tensed even more as his tails began to swish behind him. Who is doing this? The nine tails rumbled. Madara. No, that other one. But it was neither of them. And inside this accursed prison, no one should be able to summon him anyway, the only good point of it. Then what the hell was going on? What was this strange power? Without any warning, the fox was pulled abruptly, letting out a roar of anger and pain as he was slammed against the barred gate of his prison. He felt his power being siphoned away and could feel the pain increasing as the pulling intensified. The nine-tailed demon fox didn't know what was happening, but he did know one thing. Whoever was responsible for this would suffer. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, was sitting in a chair, inside a small apartment. His Anbu guards had surrounded the place in a protective perimeter, but no one was actually present inside. So the old Kage, too, sat alone, in silence, while smoking his pipe and reading a small orange book. He was in this apartment waiting for a particular someone. A special little boy, who turned 7 today. He hadn't seen him in a while and was actually looking forward to this day to have an excuse and come over to visit him. He had also prepared a small gift for the child. He always enjoyed his meetings with the boy. Naruto reminded him so much of his successor, that it was like looking at a young Minato. And he would always smile, no matter how down he was feeling. Of course, the old man knew that was just a mask. Nevertheless, one of the boy's smiles was able to brighten up the old man's day, no matter how hard it was. He chuckled a bit as he looked at the present he had gotten him. This year, he had bought him a sleeping cap that looked like the head of a hippo. He remembered how happy the boy was last year when he gave him that frog wallet, the blonde so affectionately called Gama-chan. 3. A familiar feeling swept over Hiruzen as he felt his spine shiver. No, this couldn't be. He muttered as he looked out of the window. All of a sudden a vile, yet familiar demonic chakra filled the air as it swept the village. In a blink of an eye, all of his Anbu guards were present and around him. The Hokage himself had already stood up and was hastily making his way towards the door. He couldn't shake the feeling he might not see the blonde boy ever again. Naruto. Sasuke's jaw clenched in fear as cold sweat started pouring over his body at what was unfolding in front of him. There, bent over and holding his bleeding stomach, was Naruto, screaming in pain. Vile red, bubbling chakra had started surrounding him, until it formed into what looked like a cloak, with the addition of two fox-like ears coming from his head and a tail swishing behind him. The blonde's screams intensified as he suddenly arched his back, shooting up his head, as he was lifted a bit from the ground. Sasuke could see his t-shirt soaked in blood, but what shocked him even more was what looked like the head of a fox forming over where his stomach was, as if it was being pulled. At this sight, a sudden realization formed in Sasuke's mind. Someone was hurting Naruto. Someone was trying to kill his friend. The red chakra saw frozen Sasuke on his feet in fear, but the raven-haired Uchiha still opened his mouth in an attempt to scream for help. But before a sound could manage to come out of his trembling lips, the area around the blonde started to get distorted. Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise at what he was seeing. Small red cracks started to form around Naruto, as if there was glass there being shattered. In a flash of bright orange light, the blonde was no more. All that was left were the slowly vanishing cracks. Sasuke fell on his knees as he suddenly started taking huge breaths. His eyes were fixed in the area where Naruto had stood, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. In the blink of an eye, Naruto Uzumaki had disappeared from this world. Sweat was pouring over Leonard's forehead. This wasn't part of the plans. He had never anticipated it would take so much magical power to perform the summoning. Something wasn't right. He looked over at the storage seals and saw that there were only 5 circles still filled with Larsima. And one of them was actually halved. The dark sorcerer bit back a curse. They should have gathered more of those orbs. Consequences be damned. It didn't matter anymore though. All he could do now was concentrate on the summoning and hope for its success. No sooner had he thought that when he noticed the distortion at the summoning circle, with red cracks appearing around it. In a flash of orange light, what looked like a red fox appeared. Leonard let a small smile at that. With the appearance of the demon, he could feel the power it carried in the air as well as the wickedness and malice oozing from it. His smile faltered though, when he took a moment to examine more thoroughly what they had summoned. "What's going on?" Morgana's voice came from his left. "That looks like a small boy." "That is not an ordinary boy, no. It appears the demon is sealed inside him, yes." "Great, what are we going to do now?" Cornelius shouted from one of the farther medium circles. Leonard took a deep breath. "We carry on with the ritual. We will just extract the demon from the boy, then divide and absorb its power." The necromancer immediately focused at his words, but Leonard could still feel the other's reluctance. "This is no time to hesitate. We are already halfway through the ritual. There's nothing else that can be done," he screamed as he started focusing himself. Slowly the 2 other men focused their power as well. Leonard didn't even turn his head at Morgana. They didn't need her to finish anymore anyway. 4 of them would be enough. He would deal with her later. As they focused their power, they could see the blonde child being lifted above the ground, with vile red energy coming out of his stomach. As the energy increased and gathered in the air, it slowly started taking the shape of a wild beast. When the boy's screams of anguish finally ceased and his bloody and burned body fell to the ground, Leonard's eyes widened at what was standing before them. A large red-orange fox, with 9 swishing tails, looked around each of them with bloodthirsty eyes that promised nothing short of pain and massacre. It lifted its head and let out an inhuman roar of fury. That's when the dark sorcerer realized something had gone wrong. The demon was not contained anymore and he had no control over it. He looked at the storage circles and his eyes widened in shock. They were all empty. The extraction must have taken all of the Lacrima's magical power away. It didn't matter, they just had to subdue it now and then take its power. The nine-tailed demon fox looked around the new area he was at. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the wonderful air he so missed. Freedom at last. He had no idea where he was, but judging by what looked like a summoning pentagram, he ventured a guess that it was thanks to the 5 hooded individuals he was here. A wicked smile grew upon his face. It was time to thank them properly. After all, he hadn't gone on a killing spree in a long time. Leonard felt a chill run down his spine, or rather, the spine of his possessed body, when he saw the menacing eyes of the demon fix on him. The grin the fox had already made him uncomfortable, but now with that gaze directed at him, the dark sorcerer quickly made a few hand signs. As he finished, the book in front of him began emanating dark power. Chains of Hell's Gates. He muttered, and 5 black chains shot from the ground and enveloped the giant fox's legs and neck. Of course, these weren't ordinary chains. As the name suggested, they were actually heated with fires from hell. Leonard wasn't done with just that though. He put one hand on the book, drawing more of his power from it, and lifted his other hand, quickly making some more hand signs. Dark Embrace. A black wave shot from his outstretched arm, wrapping around the fox's body. With an additional hand sign, he pulled the energy as it began to tighten more and more. The Nine Tails was furious. Just as he was about to smash the insignificant human before him, he was captured with burning chains that actually hurt. As if they weren't bad enough, he was also wrapped with some black energy that slowly began crushing his chest. The fox would have none of that. Letting out a huge roar, he released some of his power from his body, instantly shattering the bonds and dispersing the black energy. Before the figure responsible for them could react, he was captured in Kyuubi's paw. The demon then proceeded in crushing its body, enjoying every moment of the screams of pain, the cracking of the bones, and the blood that spilled like he was crushing a ripe tomato. Quite satisfied with his kill, he directed his attention to the other cloaked figures, who weren't just standing doing nothing though. As she saw Blair's demise, Morgana shivered a bit and let one of her bracelets fall into her palm. Turning around rapidly, she hurled it towards the fox's neck, making a few signs with her free hand. The bracelet's runes began to glow as it enlarged considerably. The Kyuubi, seeing the possible danger, moved his arm to stop it, but to his surprise, the piece of jewelry passed through it. It continued on, passing through his neck as well, until it was around it like a collar. Clenching her hand into a fist, Morgana moved it down, making the bracelet extremely heavy. Her actions brought the fox's head into the ground, creating a small crater from the weight. That should hold the demon long enough for her to recover the boy. She didn't get the chance though, as her companions began making their respective attacks. Sleek was touching the ground with his hands, dark energy oozing from them. It was a good thing this was an ancient keep, no doubt having been a place of numerous battles which would supply the bodies he needed perfectly. Army of the undead, he exclaimed in a resonating hollow voice, making 100 skeletons holding various weapons rise from the ground. As he issued a silent command, they began hacking and slashing at the demon's legs and tails. Babajide had taken the opportunity to prepare one of his more powerful spells during the spare time. He held one of his amulets up and channeled a large quantity of his magical power through it. Locust Swarm. Immediately, countless locusts started pouring out from the now enlarged amulet. The giant wave of insects enveloped the fox as they started biting furiously. Not to be left behind, Cornelius threw 6 bottles containing liquid at the ground. Nitro wolves, he chanted, making the liquid from the now shattered containers take the shape of 6 wolves as they all charged towards the fox, climbing over its back and exploding when they reached the base of 6 of its tails. Under the relentless attacks, Kyuubi let out another roar of fury and pain. He would make them suffer for this. Channeling some of his vile chakra, he made it encase his body. Immediately, all the wounds he had accumulated healed as if they never existed. The poisonous chakra took care of the pesky locusts before they had the time to pull away. Now to teach those fools a lesson, he would first task responsible for the annoying collar. The fox shot one of his tails towards Morgana and wrapped it around her body, before the woman had the time to react. He proceeded to lift her in the air at enormous speed and slam her into the ground. He then threw her body into one of the nearby buildings, making the wall she hit collapse from the force of impact. Feeling the bracelet immediately lighten and fall through his neck, The Nine Tails lifted his head and raised the whole building on top of the female mage, making sure it would be her grave forever. Whipping his tails, the demon started disposing quickly of the skeletal army, while turning towards the figure responsible for the insects. That fleshling's bugs had not only bit and tore at his flesh, but the fox had suspicion they were filled with deadly poison as well. Of course, that didn't make that big of a difference, since his own chakra was considered one of the deadliest poisons in existence. It was time to give the human a taste of his own medicine. The Nine Tails grabbed Babajide with his arm, but instead of crushing his body like with his first victim, he let his demonic chakra burn the man's skin, enjoying every bit of the wails of anguish. As they began to lessen, the demon merely tossed the body into the raging waves of the ocean. While he was busy with that, he had taken care of the undead army as well. His attention turned once more to the shattered bones on the ground though, as they began trembling. In a moment's notice, they were lifted in the air, forming a large amount of bone spears and shot with incredible speed towards the fox. Kyubi did nothing to stop them, as most just bounced off his chakra cloak and those that didn't were insignificant. So that one liked playing with bones, did he? Good, so did the Nine Tails. Bringing his fist over the necromancer, he began pounding him into the ground, creating a small crater in the process. After the fourth or fifth hit, the fox lifted the shattered body like a doll and proceeded in tearing off an arm and a leg from it, before hurling it with great force towards the mainland. Enjoying himself to the fullest, the fox let out a small chuckle as he turned to the last one. The demon noticed that while he was taking care of his companion, the plump, cloaked figure had started running away. Perfect, he enjoyed a good chase. Without much effort, Kyubi reached the running Cornelius and grabbed him with one of his tails. He held the trembling man up to his face, before giving him a toothy smile. The fox particularly enjoyed the taste of fear in his victims. Throwing the fat man into the air, he snapped his jaws around him. In retrospect, the Nine Tails realized that hadn't been a good idea. After a chew or two, he felt an extremely foul taste in his mouth and quickly spat the body into a nearby building. Disappointed at being denied his meal after so long, the fox collapsed it in a fit of rage. Now that he was finished with his little fun, the Nine Tails decided to survey the area. He was on some sort of rocky headland, surrounded by the ocean on three sides. There was only one building still standing and it appeared to be the ruins of some kind of fort. His gaze was then directed down towards the summoning pentagram and even the fox had to admit it looked quite impressive. Had it not caused him so much pain, he would have studied it more deeply. The fox's eyes fell on the body of his previous jailer. He lifted an eyebrow as he saw the boy's chest moving slightly, signifying Naruto was still alive. If only barely. The extraction had probably destroyed all of the child's chakra network, as well as caused what looked like various burns and a very bad wound on his stomach, from where the seal was broken. Maybe it would be best for the blonde if he just granted him a quick death. The child had suffered enough in his life already. Nine Tails' gaze lingered over Naruto's body for a bit before stretching his paw slowly towards him. Before it could reach the blonde though, a violent roar pierced through the havens. Kyubi looked up only to see a tail, hitting him square in the face and throwing him into the last standing building of the ruins, the keep itself. With a roar of his own, the fox stood up only for his eyes to widen in surprise at a creature he had never seen before. It stretched its giant wings and swung them violently, creating a huge whirlwind, which blowed away the Kyubi before he could even react, sending the demon hundreds of meters away into the ocean, along with what was left of the castle. The winged beast grumbled at the incomprehensible yelling, no doubt promises of torture and murder, coming from the flying fox. That didn't worry it that much. All of the demon lot were the same loudmouths, most likely trying to compensate for something they lacked. The newly arrived creature set its gaze upon the bleeding figure of Naruto Uzumaki. Warm. Naruto felt warm. He opened his eyes and closed them immediately at the sudden brightness. And then opened them again, much slower this time. He took in the surroundings and discovered that everything around him was white, without any noticeable features. He stood up a bit on his elbows and turned his head around. There really wasn't anything here. Where am I? Then the memories hit him. The burning pain, the pulling, the cloaked figures and then more pain. He had never felt so much in his life before and remembered he was begging for it to stop or for him to die. In comparison, warm was a vast improvement, even though he wasn't sure of his current whereabouts. Am I dead? No, we are in your mind. At the sudden feminine voice, Naruto jumped to his feet and turned towards whence it came from, faster than one would expect from a 7-year-old boy. His eyes widened in surprise and his jaw fell slightly at what he saw. A couple of meters in front of him, two people were standing. He wasn't sure how he didn't see them before when he looked around, but he immediately recognized one of them. He was a tall, white-skinned man, with blonde spiky hair and blue eyes, much like his own. He had jaw-length bangs, which fell over a blue leaf forehead protector, framing the sides of his face. He wore a standard leaf nin uniform, which consisted of a dark blue long-sleeved shirt with 2 bands on each arm and dark blue pants. His ankles and calves were bandaged, catching up the bottom of his leggings, and he wore black sandals. Over his shirt he had a green flak jacket and a short-sleeved, long, white coat, with flame-like motifs on the edges. Before him stood his idol and hero, the 4th Hokage. He didn't recognize the person next to him though. It was a fair-skinned woman, with bright red hair that reached all the way to her ankles. Strands were falling on each side of her face and a yellow clip prevented her hair from falling over her violet blue eyes. She wore a high-collared, sleeveless, loose-fitting dress with a beige apron over, which framed her slender, feminine figure. Naruto noticed she was holding hands with the 4th, while they were making their way towards him. "Who are you?" At his question the 2 adults stopped a couple of steps away and the blonde man was the first to answer. "My name is Minato Namikaze," he said, giving him a huge grin. Before Naruto was able to tell him he already knew that and wasn't asking him really, the woman spoke. "Mine is Kushina Uzumaki," she gave him a small smile of her own. Naruto's eyes shot at her face when he heard her last name. Could she be? Seeing that, Kushina's smile grew wider as she continued, "We are your parents, Naruto." The recently arrived creature approached the boy, lowering its head to inspect him better. Its eyes narrowed when it saw the state of his body. The child's life was fading rapidly, it realized. It stretched its claws towards the blonde, with pale energy surrounding them, but stopped when it sensed a huge gathering of vile power coming from the ocean. Turning its head, the winged beast quickly made its way to the edge of the cliff, where the ruins of the keep had previously stood. In the distance, it saw Tchting on its back legs on the surface of the ocean. Its head was looking upwards with all its 9 tails outstretched over its nose with the tips pointing at what looked like a black orb of energy, 3 times the size of its head. The winged creature narrowed its eyes as the orb seemed to slowly get smaller, but the power it could feel from it only increasing. What is he up to? It briefly wondered until it saw the fox open its mouth to swallow the orb, as realization struck. If that were to hit, it would wipe out the whole headland. The creature grumbled as it took in a huge breath, gathering magical energy in its chest. There was no time for this. It was a miracle the boy was still breathing and would fade any second if he wasn't tended to. Its thoughts turned from the blonde child and focused on the task at hand. It had to use just the right amount of power or risk the shockwave finishing the job the vile demon had started. Just enough to create a diversion to escape with the child. It finished gathering its power just as the fox swallowed the black orb. Both beasts looked at each other for a brief moment before releasing their respective attacks. The 2 energies shot in monumental speeds from their mouths and met in the middle where they both started struggling for dominance. Neither able to come on top, brief deafening silence fell, followed by a bright flash of light and an enormous explosion, making a huge hole in the ocean. The winged beast didn't waste any time to marvel at the awe-inspiring sight though. It quickly turned and grabbed the blonde boy in its mouth, channeling magical energies to rapidly begin the healing. The giant creature then turned into a small ball of light as it disappeared in a burst of speed into the night. This hadn't been a good day for her. In fact, this was probably the worst day she had ever experienced. Since the moment of her death and the sealing of the 9-tailed demon fox in her son, things had been going from bad to worse. The mistreatment of her boy in the orphanage. The refusal of everyone to adopt him and give him a loving home and a family. The abandonment of his godfather and those she and his father considered friends and family. The blind hatred of the villagers. In retrospect, she considered those good days. For the bad ones were hell for her. She couldn't be with her son when he was scared and alone in the empty apartment. She couldn't put him to sleep when he was having a nightmare. She couldn't soothe him when he was crying. She couldn't hug him when he wondered who his parents were and why weren't they with him. She couldn't kiss him on his birthday and spend it with him. All she could do was watch her son suffer undeservedly. For part of Kushina Uzumaki's being was sealed in her son, since the day he was born. It was done right before her death, so when the time came and he was to face the nine-tailed demon fox in order to subdue it, she would be there to assist him in any way possible. Yet, Kushina didn't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate to see her son grow. She was happy at first, but no parent should ever witness their child suffer, without being able to do anything about it. Not once did she stop regretting her decision to agree with Minato. She was going to die anyway, he should have sealed the demon in her. The village, the people and the world be damned. At least then, Naruto would have his father. At least then, he would have been loved and appreciated. At least then, no one would tell him, it would be better for the world that he was dead. But today, her regret had reached its highest peak. First she had to witness yet another lonely birthday. As the years passed, those would get increasingly hard on her and she could feel her heart shattering in pieces during each one. And then, the unthinkable had happened. Her son was summoned to what looked like another world, because of what he held. She had watched through tears and horror, she had listened to his screams and begged whatever God was listening for this to only be a nightmare, an illusion. It wasn't. She knew at the moment Minato had appeared in front of her, tears falling from his eyes. That meant the seal was broken. Her first reaction was to slap him without holding back anything, and to slap him again. And again. Until her slaps turned into punches and he decided to hold her in his embrace. That's when she gave in, when her tears kept flowing uncontrollably and her sobs had turned into wails. Kushina cried 7 years worth of tears and she didn't need to see Minato's face to know he was doing the same. They had failed as parents and they had failed Naruto. After a while, Kushina had calmed down and she heard her husband say, "Kushi-chan, it's time to meet him." Horror fell to her face at his words. Of course she was happy she could finally see him face to face and tell him she loved him. But what would he think when they told him the whole story? That they were responsible for his years of solitude and pain. He would reject them, no doubt. And he would have any right to. There was no forgiveness for people like them. "Kushi-chan," Minato began, but she didn't let him finish. "I know. We owe him at least an explanation. After so many years, I won't abandon him now." She moved out of his arms and looked into his blue eyes, giving him a weak smile. "Let's go meet our son, Mini-kun, one." Minato returned her smile, grabbing her hand and squeezing it tight. "Let's go." And here they were now. In front of their 7-year-old son, right after they had told him they were his parents. The 9-tailed demon fox climbed on the headland and immediately surveyed the area. He was alone. There was nothing but the ruins of the 2 buildings he had destroyed and the now empty summoning pentagram. That winged creature had apparently left with his former container. 2 things would probably happen to the boy. He would either die or the strange beast would save him. Either way, the Kyuubi didn't care much. In the first case, the boy would most likely finally find peace in the afterlife. In the second, he would have another shot at life, without any burdens or unwarranted hatred from humans. Of course, he hated his former captor, but even though he was a demon, he couldn't help but feel some sympathy for the boy and the life he had. If the fox was still in its own world, the first thing he would do would be to go and burn the Hidden Leaf village to the ground. Those bastards definitely deserved it and he would do the world a favor by massacring them all. That was the problem though. The 9 Tails had a suspicion he wasn't in his world anymore. He had traveled all around it and he had never heard of the strange speech these humans spoke and he had definitely never witnessed a creature like that before. With his thoughts on them, Kyuubi couldn't help but let out another tirade of curses against them. He was weakened from the ritual and those pathetic humans had actually managed to hurt him and make him use some of his power. He also had the suspicion that he would never recover part of his chakra, maybe even as much as half of it. He sensed it being siphoned away when their strange ritual had begun and now he wasn't sure where it was. One thing was for certain though, the fox couldn't feel it anymore, which was a serious issue. Had the fight continued with that winged beast, the 9 Tails wasn't sure he would have won. In fact, there was a huge possibility of just the opposite happening. Even though he hadn't used all his power in that final attack, the creature had matched it flawlessly. Kyuubi snorted. "If that thing wasn't in a hurry to save the boy, I would have been in trouble. Guess he should be grateful to the child for that at least. If they met again, he might even let him live because of it. He had to recover for now though. He was actually at 1/4 of his original power. He had lost a quarter because of this ritual, but the other half. Minato. Spat the fox. Indeed, the boy's father was responsible for that. He had divided the yin and yang portions of the Nine Tails chakra and had part in Naruto. The other one, the fourth Hokage, had taken in his death. But now, something was off about that. The demon sat a bit and concentrated, nearly shouting after a while. He could feel some of his yin chakra coming back. The seal Minato had placed on himself must have been somehow linked with the one placed on Naruto. And now with that one broken and the fox out in the open, the other one must have been broken as well. Kyuubi suspected that wasn't all there was to it. Most likely the ritual itself had something to do with that as well. Nevertheless, soon the Nine Tails would be restored to its former glory, almost at least, since now he realized the portion he lost during that ritual would never return to him. It was regrettable, but it wouldn't be too bad, now that he had his yin chakra back. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years, he would be as strong as he once was, despite the loss. For now, he needed to rest and restore himself. Most importantly, he needed information about this strange world. The techniques those humans and the creature had used were definitely not chakra techniques. And the Kyuubi could feel it in the air, something was different about this place. He surveyed the area again for anything that could be helpful. His eyes narrowed a bit when he looked at the building he had thrown the second cloaked individual in, a woman if he had to make a guess. Something was off about that place. As he made a step towards it, an object caught his eye. Beside a fumbled podium laid an open book. The fox sniffed the area around it and grinned wickedly. Oh, this was a smell he thought he would never come across again. A power so familiar to his own, they were almost the same. He picked the book in his paw and brought it closer to his face. Hello. Leonard. We're your parents, Naruto. The words still rang in his ears and echoed through his blank mind. Huh. Wah. Seeing how the mind would remain blank for a while, Naruto's body decided to take initiative for now. He could think all about it later. That's how Naruto found himself running towards his mother. She immediately knelt down, allowing him to jump with full force into her embrace. He buried his face into her chest and wrapped his small arms around her. Unable to contain himself anymore, he began to sob and shake in his mother's arms. He had parents, he wasn't alone. Kushina sat on her knees and placed her son on her lap, as she lightly began rocking his body. She hummed a soothing song to try and calm her sobbing child. She saw Minato kneeling in front of them and placing his arm in Naruto's hair. Kushina smiled at the thought. Their small family was finally together again, after 7 long, painful years. After a while, Naruto stopped crying and trembling. He probably would have cried to sleep from all the mental and emotional exhaustion, but since this was his mind, he technically already was sleeping or rather unconscious. He turned a bit and looked at his parents and was almost brought to tears again when he saw the love and adoration present in their eyes. He had never seen such eyes in his life. He was used to cold glares or eyes filled with hatred. He just looked at them for a while, still hugging his mother tightly, as if afraid if he were to let go she would disappear and he would be left alone again. Slowly, more and more questions started pouring into his mind. The fourth was his father. Why has no one told him so far? Why was he hated then? Why hasn't anyone told him who his mother was? Finding himself more and more confused, he decided it was time to ask them. Mom, Dad, what is going on? What happened to me? Taking a deep breath, it was his father that answered. Well, Naruto. It is a long story. You better brace yourself. Nodding slightly, the blond boy turned a bit towards his father, still never letting go of his mother. It all started 7 years ago, on this very date, the 10th of October. As you know, that was the day the 9-tailed demon fox attacked the village without warning. The same day you were born as well. Naruto just nodded again, showing he was listening intently. What most people were told was that the fox is a natural occurring disaster, that just happened to hit our village. That is a lie to keep the civilians at ease. There are actually 9-tailed beasts in existence. They are usually masses of chakra and hatred that would destroy everything they came across with. But at some point during the past, people saw them as weapons. So to better control them and use their powers for war, the tailed beasts were sealed into humans and those humans would be known as Jinchuriki, too. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, was famous for being able to control tailed beasts and had a couple of them under him, including the 9-tailed demon fox, which was considered one of the more powerful, if not the most, of all the beasts. To keep it in the possession of the village even after his death, the Kyuubi was sealed in his wife, Mito Uzumaki. Shock was clearly visible on Naruto's face. Before he could express it though, this time it was his mother that spoke. You see, the Uzumaki clan was famous for two things: our sealing techniques and our longevity. The Uzumaki clan is not native to the Hidden Leaf village, its origins. Our origins actually lie in the village hidden in the whirling tides. But the two villages were close allies, and the Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan are actually distant relatives, so political marriages to strengthen the alliance weren't uncommon. Since Mito Uzumaki was going to live a long life and was the wife of Hashirama Senju, she was naturally chosen as the first Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed demon fox. But as she grew old in years, at one point it was decided that a new host would be chosen. That host was me. I had a special type of chakra that could help with the control of the beast, and because of that, I was moved to the Hidden Leaf at a young age and would join its ranks as a ninja. It was actually surprisingly fortunate, because shortly after I moved away, the village hidden in the whirling tides was attacked and completely destroyed, and the Uzumaki clan was wiped out, with only me and Mito as the sole known survivors. Naruto had remained silent the whole time, unconsciously holding his breath during the story. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It almost felt like a fairy tale. He didn't dare interrupt though. He realized the story was actually just beginning. Kushina smiled at the thirst evident in Naruto's eyes. He was certainly enjoying the history lesson. Her smile fell a bit though at the part that was coming up. She briefly looked at Minato, who just gave her a nod. Kushina understood that she should continue and he would join in from time to time. Which brings us to the 10th of October, the day you were supposed to be born. The happiest day of my life, because I would be able to hold my beautiful little son. Kushina chuckled when she saw Naruto's face becoming red in embarrassment at her words, but carried on. You see, Naru-kun, there was one problem though. There is one point in a female Jinchuriki's life when the seal containing the demon would weaken. That's when she would give birth. Because of that, I was to be escorted to a secure location outside the village into a special barrier, in case the seal broke and the nine tails escaped. That way, the village would be out of harm's way. Naruto looked down at her words and swallowed slightly. Is that what happened, Mom? Did the seal break because of me? Of course not, Naruto. His father spoke, as he ruffled his hair. I was actually a very good seal master, and I was present during your birth so I could specifically hold the seal in place. You were born without any hitch. I actually remember, the third's wife was the one that delivered you and she scolded me for worrying too much. Minato explained with a small chuckle, making Kushina and Naruto smile as well. What happened was something no one could have predicted. Well, I suppose since we are in your mind, we should just show you our memories. Negan to watch the events that were to unfold, as if he himself was there. In a way, he actually was. The blonde boy watched in horror as a masked man showed up and killed the third's wife and had taken his infant self hostage. His eyes widened as he saw how his father saved him from the exploding tag and took him to a special hideout. The scene then switched to his mother's memories and he shuddered as he saw her bound to a cliff and witnessed the fox being pulled away from her body. Seeing the familiar scene, he immediately understood what had actually happened to him a while ago. He had the fox sealed in him and someone had extracted it the same way as with his mother. He had many questions about that, but decided not to interrupt. He opted to just squeeze his mom tighter, offering some sort of comfort to her. He had experienced the same pain after all. He almost gave a small cheer when he saw his father showing up and saving his mom from the fox's claws. Minato then brought her to the same hideout he was at and had set her on the bed next to his infant self. Seeing his mom crying just made Naruto squeeze her one more time. The scene then switched to the village where the fox had started rampaging. He watched in awe how his father diverted what looked like a giant orb of black chakra from the village. After that, Naruto witnessed quite possibly the coolest thing he had ever seen in his life. His father, the fourth Hokage, battling and winning against the masked figure responsible for everything. Not only was Minato able to defeat him, but he also wrestled control of the fox from him. Naruto looked at his dad with even more respect and adoration than ever before. But the small celebration was cut short when he saw what came next. His father teleported the nine tails to the hideout and after a brief discussion with his mother had proceeded in sealing half of the fox in himself and the other half in Naruto. He almost jumped when he saw how Kyubi tried to prevent the sealing by killing his infant self, only for both his parents ending being impaled by a huge claw, in order to protect him. The memories had ended at that point and Naruto had remained silent, looking down at his hands. He wasn't sure what to make of all of this. On one hand, he was happy at the enormous trust his parents had placed in him. They believed that the masked man would bring destruction to the world and to prevent that they had entrusted Nine Tails' power to him, in order to one day defeat him. On the other, they had cursed him into a life of loneliness and pain. The villagers' eyes and voices passed through his mind. There he is. That's the fox brat. Stay away from him, he is evil. His parents left him alone. Who would want a demon for a child? Just ignore him. The empty apartment. The solitary birthdays. After each thought his face only frowned more and more with anger. Then he saw something fall from above him, onto his clenched fists. Something warm and wet. Looking up, he was a bit surprised to see tears falling from his mother's face. I'm sorry, Naruto, the woman cried, as she held him against her. I should have pulled the fox with me and died. You should have never carried such a burden. I've seen every day of your life since then, and if I knew it would have turned out like that, I would have never agreed. I have failed you as your mother and I don't deserve forgiveness for what I did. But know that not a moment has passed since that I haven't regretted my decision, and if there was any way, I would change it in a heartbeat. That's not true, Kushi-chan. It's my fault things turned out like that. Back then, I thought Hiruzen would have protected him better, or Jiraiya would have actually taken care of him as his godfather. I believed in the village. It's not an excuse though. In the end, I was the one that convinced you. It is my fault entirely that things turned like they did, so you shouldn't blame your mother, Naruto. If you want to hate anyone, hate me. Naruto was taken aback by what his parents were saying. He was even more shocked when he saw their eyes. They were filled with genuine regret for everything that had happened. They didn't even want any forgiveness. Now that he thought about it, he supposed they had their reasons at the time. Everything seemed all too complicated for him. He wasn't sure what he would have done in the same situation. But he realized he shouldn't be mad about it now. It was all in the past and it wouldn't change anything. He should just enjoy the moments with his parents from now on. He lifted one of his arms and placed it on his mother's cheek. Startled, she looked down at him, tears still flowing from her violet eyes. It's all right, Mom. I don't know yet how I feel about the whole thing, but it's all in the past now. We should just enjoy our time together. With that, Naruto gave his mother a huge smile. This time, it was Kushina and Minato's turn to be shocked. They had expected him to be angry and to curse them. They had expected him to say he never wanted to see them again. But they certainly had not expected their 7-year-old son acting in such a mature way. He had admitted he didn't know what to make of it all, but at the same time, that it wasn't that important, that it was in the past. Well, he certainly is our son. Minato chuckled. Are you surprised, Mini-kun? He looks exactly like you. Not entirely. He has your face, Kushi-chan. Hearing this, Kushina gave an embarrassed smile to Naruto. Yeah, that's right. Sorry about that, son. Why, Mom? You look really pretty. That means when I grow up, I would look really handsome. I wish I had your beautiful red hair though. I think I would have looked way better with it. Hearing that, Minato looked dejectedly at the ground, mumbling. Thanks a lot, son. What am I? He continued grumbling to himself, much to the amusement of the other two. Hee. You are right, Mini-kun, he really is your son. Seeing her child's confused expression at stating the obvious, Kushina gave him a smile. Naruto. You are only the second man to ever compliment me on my hair. The only other one being your father. At that, Naruto outright laughed. Hey, Mom, Dad, I'm really curious, how did the two of you meet and fall in love? The silence of the night had fallen over the headland. Even the ocean had calmed down and its waves now slowly caressed the cliffs. Only the noise of crickets could be heard in the gentle wind. It was a clear night, with millions of small lights painting the sky. The whole scene looked serene and calm, as if a monumental battle had not been fought at all here. More than half an hour had passed since the demon fox had left. Now the whole headland was void of life, or so it seemed. The air near one of the two collapsed buildings flickered and distorted. Slowly, the small spot changed, only to reveal a very battered Morgana. There was barely anything left of her bronze belt or the cylinders in her hair. as they were slowly crumbling to the ground. Her dress was torn in many places, barely holding together from exposing her completely. Her body was bruised and cut in many places as well, and there was an alarming red spot, which was slowly growing on her now naked stomach, signifying the possibility of internal bleeding and ruptured organs. After the illusion had fallen, Morgana fell to her knees and began gasping heavily, as if each breath of air was going to be her last. Her body began trembling uncontrollably as cold sweat started covering it. The sorceress lifted her gaze slightly to check on the area and make sure she was completely alone. She didn't even want to imagine what would happen to her if that demon were to return. It had killed everyone. Sure, there were no bodies, but she didn't need to see any. No one should have survived what it did to them. She got lucky, she realized. The sudden attack of the fox had caught her by surprise. If it wasn't for the runes on her belt and cylinders, her body would have been completely crushed. And even though she was enveloped in the protective shield, she still got severely hurt. Eon else had survived anyway. They had failed. Now because of them, there was a powerful demon unleashed on the world. True, they were exhausted when it attacked them. If it wasn't so, then maybe they wouldn't have been defeated so easily. Then again, Morgana had the suspicion the fox wasn't at full power either. She shivered, just thinking what facing something like that would have felt like. Her heart had almost stopped when the fox looked at her, despite her illusion. Her fears of the demon seeing through it only intensified when it had made a step towards her. Luck was on her side again though, since its attention had turned towards something else. In truth, they had entered dangerous waters and had paid the price for it. Their temporary leader had faced immediate and gruesome death because of that. Or his body did at least. For while Morgana had the suspicion, Blair was in fact possessed. Seeing the Nine Tails pick the book he was always carrying around only confirmed her suspicions. She didn't understand a word of what the demon was saying in some strange language, but she did make out one word. A name actually, Leonard. Morgana cursed at how careless she had been. If she knew such a powerful demon and dark sorcerer was the one behind this whole venture, she would have definitely done things differently. Of course she and Babajide had discovered the changes he had made to the runes in the pentagram. After discussing it, they had decided to make changes of their own. Instead of him absorbing the whole power by himself, it would have been divided in 4 and spread amongst the rest of the group. She didn't like them much, but Morgana was true to her word and she honored agreements, no matter with whom they were. Babajide had agreed with her surprisingly. The witch doctor was actually the only one she got along with from their group. His reason for being there wasn't entirely selfish too. Even though vengeance isn't a noble reason to pursue power, after what had happened to him, Morgana couldn't really blame him. She supposed it fell on her now to complete his goal. The group that had done it were an atrocious dark guild anyway. Of course she had to report to her guild master first. The sorceress cursed, just thinking about it. This was a huge failure indeed. After she had accepted Blair's or rather Leonard's proposal a year and a half ago, she had informed her guild master and they had proceeded in telling the Council of Mages. They weren't happy with the whole thing, but she had convinced them. There was a possibility that the cult was much bigger than Leonard had led to believe or that there was some mastermind behind it all. There could have been even more cults. Of course, she continued when she learned there was nothing of the sorts. Morgana still had suspicions that someone was controlling Blair and had remained. She believed after the ritual was done, the one responsible would reveal himself and she would have used her newly acquired power to capture him and bring him before the council. Sure, she didn't really care for the power, but it was a nice bonus, one that the sorceress would have used to her advantage. She had almost given up on the idea, when she learned some of the lacrima crystals were infused with souls of people. But they were already dead and there was nothing that could really be done about them. Morgana had just vowed she would bring the ones responsible to justice. She was arrogant, believing she could have dealt with everything on her own. Of course, she had failed. Because of her overconfidence and stupidity, she never considered the possibility the demon would be too strong or the summoning would exhaust their magic reserves so much. Not only that, but an innocent child had been involved in the whole mess as well. Tears came to her eyes when she remembered his wails of anguish. They started falling, when she remembered how the fox was probably going to kill him and how she could have done nothing about it. It was a relief when the other beast had arrived. If her suspicions about it were correct, then the boy would most likely survive. Morgana vowed on the spot, if she were to ever meet the blonde child again, she would make it up to him. Even if he wanted to kill her, she would let him without any condition. It was in his rights after what she had done, and it would be the payment for her sins. The pain in her stomach had started being more noticeable, and Morgana realized it was time to do something about it. Slowly lifting herself to her feet, she leaned on what was left of the wall. She started channeling a healing spell and let out a scream when her organs began repairing themselves. She didn't know that much healing magic, considering it was long-lost ancient magic, and what she knew was definitely insufficient to take care of the pain of the process. Her injury was grave, and she had noticed the red spot was now enlarged and dark blue on places. It was still a blessing she at least knew this spell, after she learned it from the inscriptions on a wall, in some old ruins she had explored during one of her journeys. It was a good thing ancient runes and rune magic in general was a hobby of hers, or she wouldn't have understood anything. The sorceress almost passed out from the pain, but did her best not to scream too much. It was a hard task, but she didn't want the fox to hear her and return to finish the job. Besides, this was probably nothing compared to what that child had experienced. After she was done, she immediately felt better. Her organs were repaired, the pain was fading, and the internal bleeding had disappeared completely, now revealing her royal purple guild mark on her exposed stomach. It looked like a sitting fairy, with 2 wings and a tail outstretched behind it. Taking a deep breath, the female mage straightened up. It was time she told Makarov the bad news and faced the music. She had no illusions there wouldn't be a lecture or some sort of punishment, after the colossal screw-up that was tonight. First she needed to find some clothes, though. It wouldn't be a good idea for a woman to wander alone naked in the wilderness. On second thought, knowing the pervert Makarov was, maybe she should just remain like that. That would certainly lessen her punishment. With a small smile creeping on her face, Morgana Le Fay, 3, began the long trek towards her home. Naruto couldn't believe all this was happening. Not for the first time he wondered if he was dreaming and praying for it to never end if that were the case. Sure, he had been shocked and angry at first, but that was completely replaced by the joy he was feeling now. Naruto was spending time with his parents, something he had wished for years. This was definitely his best birthday ever. He had found it quite funny at first when his mother admitted she thought Minato was a weak girly boy, the first time she met him at the ninja academy. It was ironic how he would later not only save her from a kidnapping, but also make her love her red hair, even though she was made fun of because of it. They had all laughed when Naruto had told them his favorite color was orange, probably because of their respective nicknames. The yellow Flash and the red hot-blooded Habanero. Naruto had realized he didn't get only his mother's face, as he had the same hot-headed, loud, hyperactive personality as hers. They had continued sharing stories with him later on, and even showing him some memories of their younger years, some of their dates, even though they would take turns at being embarrassed at various moments, and the many missions they would do. Naruto couldn't stop himself from laughing when he learned of his godfather Jiraiya and how he would always get pounded by his mother after she caught him peeping on women or doing other perverted things. As far as the boy was concerned, the old pervert deserved it, for not visiting him even once during all those years. As time passed on, though, there was a question in the back of Naruto's mind that kept nudging him. He got increasingly worried because of it, but chose not to voice the wonderful time he was having. Unfortunately, the rising discomfort he was feeling didn't go unnoticed by his mother. "Naru-kun, what's wrong?" The blonde youngster was still sitting in his mother's lap at the moment, and when she asked him, he slowly turned his eyes away from her face and looked down at his hands. "Nothing, Mom, I'm just happy to be with both of you right now. Don't worry," he muttered, trying to convince Kushina. "Come on, son, you don't need to hide your feelings anymore. We've waited 7 long and painful years to finally be together like this. You can tell us anything." His mother gave him a tight squeeze as she tried to reassure him. Seeing there was no escaping it, Naruto sighed. I'm just a bit scared, Mom. When I asked if I was dead, you said I wasn't and that we were just in my mind. So I was wondering what happens now. Am I going to go to the afterlife with you?" The boy turned his hopeful eyes towards Kushina, but they immediately fell when he noticed her sad smile. Seeing it was time to continue with the explanations, Minato placed a hand in his son's hair. "You see, Naruto, it might seem unbelievable, but your mother and I think that you have been summoned to another world, because of what you were holding. Even though you were in pain at the time and couldn't take notice of your surroundings, we were still able to see that you were transported from the Leaf Village to some strange-looking pentagram. There were 5 cloaked individuals that looked like they were performing some sort of ritual in order to bring the fox to them and extract it from you. Now, as we've told you earlier, if the beast is extracted or released from a Jinchuriki, then the holder would die. Kushi-chan was able to remain alive for a while because of her special chakra and the Uzumaki clan's vitality. The latter is the reason you are still alive actually, even though your chakra system has been completely destroyed. But because of that, the possibility of you actually surviving disappeared completely, since chakra is essential to all living creatures. Naruto was quite confused, as well as terrified at the same time after hearing this. Then how come I'm not dead yet and I'm not with you in the afterlife? We are not sure exactly. Minato answered. You see, when the fox was extracted and you fell into unconsciousness, we stopped monitoring what happened in the outside world and came here to talk with you. Truth be told, I expected we would have moved on by now, but while we were talking something strange happened. Your body started to heal at rapid rates. That wouldn't help that much, since as I've said, you actually had no chakra or chakra network left at all. But it seems that some strange power has replaced it, filling your body with vitality at the same time. In truth, our chakra, the one we have sealed in you so we could meet again, should have been diminished by now and we should have disappeared. It looks like because of that new power not only are you going to continue being alive, but we have gained more time, before we have to move on. Thanks to the ritual, your seal wasn't the only thing that was broken, but the one I had placed on myself as well, in order to seal the yin portion of Kyuubi's chakra. So now my soul can actually move on to the afterlife with your mother. Naruto smiled a bit at that, but it immediately disappeared when he realized that his parents would be leaving him alone again. Not only that, but now it looked like he was in another world, all by himself. In the Leaf Village he at least had the old man Hokage. Not being able to hold himself, he hugged Kushina again as tears started falling from his eyes. Understanding why her son had broken down, Kushina gave him a reassuring squeeze while caressing his cheek. Don't worry, Naru-kun. Even thought you can't come with us right now, I am actually happy that you are going to survive. There is nothing sadder for a parent than to see the death of their child. I don't think you will be alone either, because whoever did heal you and gave you this strange life force, is actually caring enough for you to go through all the trouble and most likely won't leave you on your own. But I don't want to leave you, Mom, not after I finally got to meet you and Dad after so long, not after we spend such a good time together, not after I've had the best birthday I could hope for, not after I'm finally happy. Naruto shouted, still not letting go of Kushina. But before he could say anything else, he felt his father's hand ruffling his hair. Tearing his face from his mother, he looked at Minato's broad reassuring grin. Now, son. You still have your life ahead of you. You are only 7 years old, after all. There are still so many things left for you to experience. Whatever this world is, you should give it a chance. Here you can start anew, without any of the villagers' hatred or prejudice. Here you could find friends, love and live a truly happy life. You are our son after all, we believe in you and know that you would never just give up no matter what. Hearing his father's words and his faith in him, Naruto couldn't help returning the same large grin. All right, Dad. Next time we meet, I promise I would have explored this world and will have even more awesome stories of my many adventures to tell you than both of you combined. Hearing that, Kushina hugged her son again, while giving him a kiss on the cheek. Naru-kun, I'm so proud of you. If it's you, I'm sure you can do it. I'm only sorry I wouldn't be able to see it for myself. Well, even though it was more than a curse, rather than a gift, now without the 9 tails you don't really have anything left from us. So I'm going to tell you some of my most prized techniques, the reason I became so famous and feared throughout the elemental nations. Even though you won't have any chakra anymore and this is a different world, I think you should be able to find a way to use this new power within you. Since it's you, I'm sure you'd be able to use the concepts behind them and invent them yourself here. Listen carefully, they can be a bit complicated. Wow, Dad. You really are amazing. Even though you aren't really smart at making good decisions. Naruto trailed off. He saw his father's shoulders fall a bit at his comments. Even though he had forgiven his parents, he was still slightly annoyed at his decision. So his mischievous side had decided he should tease the man a bit, making him believe he wasn't completely forgiven. Doing his best to hide his evil smile, he continued with a slightly confused expression. I think I got the spiraling one, but the others. Don't worry, son. You will always remember this meeting, so whenever you feel confused, you can just come back to your mind and replay it." Minato chuckled, while ruffling his son's hair. It was unfortunate that they would have to leave shortly. He could never get enough of doing that. "I think it's time we leave you with some parting words, to give you some guidance. Even though your life force has been restored, our energy is running short. Kushi-chan, I think the honor falls to you, since you did it last time as well and I already left him something." Kushina looked at her son as she cupped his cheek with her hand. "Naru-kun, don't be a fussy eater. I've seen how you eat only ramen, and even though ramen is great, make sure you also eat lots of fruit and vegetables and grow up to be a big boy. I've seen how you can make a mess of yourself, so keep taking baths every day. Make sure you go to bed early and have plenty of sleep and rest. Don't overdo it though. Make friends. It doesn't matter how many, but make sure they are real friends that you can trust fully and love. Make sure to study and become strong, to protect those that are precious to you as well as those that need it. It's another world, but I'm sure you can do it. Always do what you think is right and follow the path you have chosen. Don't let outdated rules or prideful old geezers hold you down and prevent you from doing what is right. Don't drink older and don't overdo it. Make sure not to borrow money. And as for women, well, I can't really help you there, since I am one. Try not to pick too weird of a girlfriend. Someone like your mother is all right." Kushina felt tears streaming down her eyes. Her voice became rigid and she found it a bit hard to continue. "Naru-kun, there is so much I want to say, to teach you about. I would do anything to be able to stay with you forever and make up for all the lost time. I love you so much." Not being able to continue, Kushina embraced her son in a tight hug, as her body racked with sobs. She felt his small hand moving to her cheek and she opened her eyes to see a smiling Naruto. "Don't worry, Mom, I will live my life to the fullest and make you and Dad proud. I am really happy to have parents like you and I love you both." The blonde's grin grew wider as he looked between both of his parents. Relief washed over Minato and he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. In truth, he had been worried the whole time his son still hated him or felt betrayed by what he did. Naruto would have the right too. But now, the fourth gave him a broad grin, ruffling the boy's hair yet again, feeling sad that this would probably be his last time. "It's time we go, Naruto. Make sure to listen to your motormouth mother, and remember, you are our son and we will always love you," Minato said as he started fading away. Kushina gave him another huge hug completed with a kiss on his cheek. "Goodbye, Naru-kun. Make sure to have a happy and full life. I am so happy for being your mother, for Minato being your father. Thank you for being our son, I love you." After their final words, both his parents faded away and disappeared. Even though he was left alone, Naruto couldn't help but continue smiling. He had never felt this happy in his entire life before. This truly was the best birthday he could hope and wish for. Naruto opened his eyes slowly and looked around. He saw he was in some sort of a cave, illuminated by various colored crystals. He marveled a bit at the beautiful sight. This was the first time he had seen so many different lights in one place. The crystals covered the ceiling and the walls and Naruto realized they reflected the light coming from the entrance of the cave. Naruto noted surprised that even though it was a closed space, the whole cave was actually full of light. He grumbled a bit as he tried to move. His whole body ached, although it wasn't as bad as when the fox was removed from him. He noticed he was lying on a couple of blankets and was covered by one as well. He was also surprised to see he was wearing new and clean clothes. A movement caught the blonde's attention. He turned his head towards the entrance of the cave as his eyes widened at the sight of the creature that was approaching him. He heard a feminine voice coming from it as it moved its mouth, showing many sharp teeth. In front of him was a beast never seen before. It was as big as the 9 tails, but unlike the fox it was completely white. Its legs and bottom side were scaly, while its head, neck and back were covered with white fur. Naruto noticed bewildered it had 2 huge white, furry wings, folded over its back and a huge scaly tail was swishing behind it with more white fur, splitting at the end. It had black eyes, which were focused on him and pointed, cat-like ears. The creature kept closing in on the blonde, while still saying something incomprehensible in its feminine voice. Naruto backed off in panic until he hit the wall. His eyes still wide in shock, the boy opened his trembling mouth and screamed. "Please don't hurt me." The white beast stopped at that and visibly narrowed its eyes as it turned its head away. Naruto noticed it was looking at a wooden crib. With a rumbling noise, which reminded the blonde of a sigh, the creature carried on its advance towards him. Naruto opened his mouth for another scream. I would appreciate it if you kept quiet, child. Naruto's jaw snapped shut at the insistent voice. He realized it was the same feminine one that came from the beast, but he could understand it this time. What surprised him even more was the fact the creature never actually opened its mouth again. Good, it seems you can understand me now. I'm glad to see you are awake and moving around. You have been asleep for 2 days now and I was getting worried. How are you feeling? Naruto was about to respond, before he was interrupted. You don't need to speak, child. Just focus your mind and think your answers. Naruto nodded slightly as he thought. Like this? He heard a low rumble, which reminded him of a chuckle. Yes, that is quite fine, child. The winged beast said as it moved even closer to Naruto, now standing right before him. It saw the boy stiffen at that and decided to reassure him. Don't be afraid, little one. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of healing you. That was you? Naruto paused. Thank you, I am feeling really good, just a bit stiff, but that's all right. How are we doing this? Assuming the boy referred to their current conversation, the creature responded. I have lived many centuries, I have traveled all over the world and I know any one of the human languages. But this is the first time I hear the one you are speaking. That is why I am speaking directly to your mind and you are doing the same. It's a special type of magic, called telepathy magic. Naruto slowly nodded, doing his best to understand. This was the first time he heard about something like that and to say he was amazed would be an understatement. Who are you? I am the Sky Dragon, Grandine Marvell. And you should know, child, it is a sign of good manners to introduce yourself first. Naruto smiled, while rubbing the back of his head with his hand. Sorry about that. I have never seen or heard of a dragon before. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. So tell me, child, how did you end up at those ruins at the paws of that dreadful demon? Naruto took a deep breath. This was going to be a long story. He remembered his life in the Leaf Village, how he was ignored and hated, even by the teachers at the Ninja Academy, and how the only one who cared for him was the old man Hokage. He remembered the excruciating pain when he was summoned and when the fox was ripped from his body. He then remembered the meeting with his parents and all the things they told him about. Slowly exhaling, he thought. This is going to be a long story. Where should I begin? You've already told me everything, child. The dragon spoke. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise until realization struck. Apparently, he could communicate memories the same way as words. You've had a difficult life, little one. Grandine lowered her head, resting it on her paws right before Naruto. I guess, this is a first for the both of us. I haven't seen someone from another world like you. Naruto gave her a wide grin. Hey, how were you able to save me? My parents told me the last thing that happened before I lost consciousness was the fox being extracted from me. They also told me something like that should have killed me and that I was severely hurt. Indeed, you were, Naruto. It would be better if I showed you myself. Naruto's eyes widened as the events from the dreadful night replayed before him. He was awestruck at the brief battle between the Nine Tails and Grandine. After that he shuddered a bit when he saw the dragon had grabbed him in her mouth, but then realized he was actually being healed. They returned to this cave and he was amazed to see his whole body was completely healed when Grandine opened her mouth and placed him on the floor. Yet, you were still fading away, even though I healed your body completely. Now I realize it was because of the destruction of your chakra network? In any case, it seemed like your life force itself was disappearing. So I gave you a part of my own. Naruto saw Grandine opening her paw, producing a small orb of light. Small for her at least, it actually engulfed his whole body. After danger, I changed your bloodied clothes and left you to sleep. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to restore your chakra network, so I don't think you would still be able to use your father's techniques. However, thanks to my life force, you would be able to become a mage, if you so desired. As all the events stopped replaying in his mind, Naruto tilted his head a bit to the left in confusion. A mage? What's that? What's magic anyway? Grandine chuckled at his question. It looks like I will have a lot to teach you about this world, Naruto. I think we should start with the land. The dragon was suddenly interrupted by a loud cry. Letting out an audible sigh, Grandine turned towards the wooden crib. Naruto was actually surprised to see her shrinking while she approached it. Curious himself, he decided to go look what was there. Grandine stood on her two rear legs and picked up a small baby from the crib. Even though she had shrank considerably, she was still much bigger than an average human, so she most likely had difficulty holding it. Naruto could see though, she was giving it her utmost care and concentration. He noticed the sky dragon reach for a glass bottle, most likely filled with milk, which was on a table next to the crib. He jumped a bit when he heard the shattering of glass. Letting out an annoyed growl, Grandine began speaking to the child, while rocking her gently, most likely trying to calm the baby down. Naruto decided he should offer her some help, seeing how she had done so much for him already. Grandine. I can help you with the baby if you want. My hands are smaller and I wouldn't have as much trouble holding her in the bottle. I promise I will be very careful. The dragon seemed to be giving this a thought. Letting out yet another sigh, she beckoned him. All right, come here, Naruto. Be careful, hold her with both hands. If she is too heavy for you, please tell me, don't try to push yourself. Don't worry, Grandine. I've seen mothers hold their babies before in my village. I'm quite strong, I can handle it, the blonde boasted as he took the baby in his hands. He noticed she had dark, ocean blue hair. Feeling the new presence, the child stopped crying momentarily and opened her brown eyes, giving Naruto an intense, hunger-filled gaze. Her curiosity seemed to be short-lived though, as a rumble escaped her tummy, making her cry again. Whoa! Did that come from her? Man, she must be really hungry, exclaimed the bewildered blonde. This was a whole new experience for him. He could feel many unfamiliar emotions pass through him, as he held the small, fragile life in his hands. Even though she was crying, he couldn't help but think how cute and precious the baby was. He wondered if that's what his mother and father had felt for the brief moments they were actually able to hold him. Grandine couldn't keep herself from letting out a small giggle. Those two looked insanely cute together. She noticed there was a small gleam in Naruto's eyes, which made her believe that even though he had just met the baby, he would no doubt give everything he had to protect her and make her happy. It amazed her that such a bond was formed between them instantaneously. Maybe there was some higher power working here. Now that she was able to give it her full attention, she managed to pick up another bottle of milk without much trouble. She used some of her magic to warm it a bit, before she handed it to Naruto. The boy let out a small grunt, but still ever so careful, held the baby to his chest with one hand while taking the bottle with the other and started feeding her. After a bit, he felt his arms getting tired, but he resolved himself that the only way he would drop her was if his own arms were to fall off. Nothing short of that would make him let go. He looked at Grandine. Who is she? She is my daughter, Wendy Marvell. To say Naruto was surprised would be an understatement. He looked at the baby again. So dragons' children look like human babies? That's amazing. Grandine couldn't keep herself from laughing. After she calmed down a bit, she turned towards the confused blonde. I didn't give birth to her. I found her abandoned in the forest a month ago and decided to take care of her. Hearing that, Naruto felt sadness wash over him. He looked at Wendy again and was surprised to see her staring at him with the same intensity as before. He felt a smile make its way on his face. So, she is an orphan like me. Grandine let an annoyed grumble. What nonsense are you spouting, child? Feeling he had said something wrong, Naruto turned towards the dragon, who continued. Both of you have a family. You have me, your mother, as well as each other. The blonde was speechless. Just 3 days ago, he was completely alone. He hadn't had any idea why that was or why the village hated him. He hadn't even been looking forward to his birthday, since he would have had to spend it in a hell called solitude. But in just one moment all that had changed. He had met his real parents, and even though it was for a short period of time, they had showed him they loved him deeply. Furthermore, despite him initially thinking he would be alone again in this new world, he not only had a mother, but a sister as well. Truly, the gifts for his birthday only kept getting better and better. Unable to contain himself, tears started falling from the boy's eyes. Seeing that, Grandine let out a small chuckle, as she moved close to the two children and enveloped them lovingly with her arms and wings in a warm hug. Welcome to the family, Naruto. Naruto woke up and slowly opened his eyes. He was greeted by the ceiling of their small one-bedroom house. He turned his head a bit to the small window and saw the sun was already high in the sky. He realized there were several things wrong with the whole situation. First and foremost, apparently he had overslept. He had made it a habit during these past 3 years to wake up as early as possible for his morning routine. Of course, with a sister like Wendy, that wasn't really an issue. Thinking of her brought the second problem in view. Shuffling under the blanket, Naruto felt he was alone in the bed. Since he was the one that usually woke up first, he had to move carefully, as to not wake up his little sister, so he could do his exercises and prepare breakfast. Wendy not being in the bed when he woke up was as rare as him oversleeping. And the final problem was the bed itself. On rainy and sometimes cloudy nights, they usually slept in the small house, under a roof. Otherwise, they would sleep outside with their mom. The cold never really was an issue, since she would just wrap them with the furry part of her tail and bring them close to her body, which was a great source of warmth. She was after all a dragon. That's what they had done last evening. It was an unusually cloudless October night and the clear sky was actually overwhelmed with the lights of distant stars. It had been one of their family fun events for a long time, when there was such a clear night, to gaze at the light show. Grandine would teach them the names of the various stars and would show them the different constellations. She always said one day they might get lost somewhere and they could find their way home with the help of the stars. Of course, as with many things, it had quickly turned into a game. Wendy and Naruto had both started imagining what type of different worlds were out there, with ridiculous guesses from chocolate mountains and volcanoes that spew milk instead of lava to green skies that had flying cats soaring through them. Even Grandine couldn't withstand her children's wild imaginations and was pulled into providing her own unique insights. Last night, they had tried guessing which light Naruto came from originally. As per usual, Wendy was the one that had started the guessing game. Ever since she was old enough to understand her brother was not from Earthland, she had been curious and eager to visit his old world. Naruto would sometimes try to paint the peculiarities from it using the stars, like Ma of a Kunai or a shuriken or even the leaf logo. Thinking about it, he never actually missed his previous home. He never even felt nostalgic. He had come to adore his new family in the past 3 years, and after he had learned more about the world, he realized it was as beautiful, if not more, as his old one. The first 2 years had been, for lack of a better word, bumpy. He didn't get that much sleep and neither did Grandine. Wendy would constantly wake up in the middle of the night either being hungry or needing to be changed. Since it was more difficult for the dragon, Naruto had been glad to step up and always be the one to deal with her needs, with Grandine providing help of course. Because of that, he had adopted the rule to sleep whenever he could, which hadn't been that much actually, hence how he got used to waking up early. He never complained though. Naruto loved Wendy with all his heart and would always drop anything on the spot whenever she was crying or had a problem. Her smile and incredibly cute laughter would always brighten his day, no matter how tired he was. His favorite thing to do was putting her to sleep, while their mom was telling one of her bedtime stories about the other dragons and the magical world they lived in. A huge smile grew on Naruto's face, as he remembered some of the big events while Wendy was growing. Her first words, her first tooth, and how she would cry in her sleep sometimes, because of it, her first steps, her birthdays. Thinking about it, she had just turned 3 years old last month. Coincidentally or not, Grandine had found her on the 9th of September, exactly 1 month before Naruto's birthday. They had decided they would celebrate it on that date, since she couldn't be much older than a week, 2 at most than that. Each birthday, Grandine would let them ride on her back and they would go flying on a field trip of sorts, during the whole day. Needless to say, that had become Wendy's favorite thing to do, and as her birthday approached, her excitement would grow and she would count the hours even. Spending time with his little sister was probably Naruto's most favorite thing in the world, no matter if it was playing around or just sleeping. The blonde still couldn't believe how fortunate he was for this new life and family. Now, he couldn't even imagine what it would be like, without them, without Wendy's adorable smile, without Grandine's warm embrace, without their complete affection. As she was getting older, Wendy's regime had become more normal and she didn't constantly wake up during the night. Naruto had continued waking up early though, since he had gotten used to it. There was a different problem though. His sister had started growing out of her crib, so instead of building a bigger one, Naruto had decided they should just sleep together. She sometimes had problems with nightmares anyway, and ever since Wendy started sleeping with her brother, they had actually lessened. At some point Naruto and Grandine had decided to build a small one-room house, where they would keep their bed and clothes. The cave was quite spacious and with the countless lacrima crystals, It never really needed any illumination. But that had started being an issue, since there was no way short of their mom casting a spell to make the lights go off. Not to mention the floor was edgy and uneven and it wasn't that comfortable to put a cupboard or bed on it. It didn't take them long to build it, especially since Grandine used some of her magic to gather the materials. It was constructed in a small clearing, a short distance away from the cave. Even though it was small, it was actually quite homey and they didn't really need anything fancy or big anyway, since they used it only for storage and sleep, with the latter being on occasions. They spent most of their time outside, and with their mother being the Sky Dragon, wielder of the lost art of healing magic, they never got sick. The only bad side was Grandine couldn't fit in, so she either stayed right outside or slept in the cave on the rainier nights. He was brought out of his inner thoughts at this. How did he end up in bed, if last night was a clear night and they spent it outside? And where was Wendy? Naruto got up and out of the bed, with an uneasy feeling creeping in his stomach. He would have nightmares about this sometimes. Waking up and realizing he was completely alone again, that Grandine and Wendy were gone or never existed. In truth, that was part of the reason he had opted to sleep together with his family as much as possible. Whenever he would have such a nightmare and wake up sweating, Wendy's presence would always calm him down and reassure him he wasn't alone. He had never said anything about it, but he was sure his mom knew. Instead of talking about it, she had decided to just be there for her son. His uneasiness was briefly brought to a halt when he heard a thud from something falling to the ground. Looking down, he saw the only thing he had left from his old world, his wallet, Gama-chan. He had given it to Wendy before she had even turned 1 year old. It was a stormy night and the roar of thunder would keep his little sister up and crying, no matter what he and Grandine tried to calm her. In a moment of desperation, he had reached for his pocket and taken out Gama-chan. The green wallet immediately caught Wendy's attention, and ever since then they were inseparable. She would take it everywhere with her, even when she took baths. Seeing it only increased Naruto's fears, and after picking it up quickly, he jumped out of the house and looked around the clearing. Neither Grandine nor Wendy were anywhere in sight. He took in the surroundings quickly and noticed there had been fire in their makeshift oven, signifying it had been used. So they had prepared breakfast, but where had they gone? The whole situation seemed very unusual. Looking around some more, he noticed his mother's prints going towards the cave. Letting out a sigh, Naruto quickly started running towards it. As he reached the entrance, he noticed another strange thing. The cave was completely dark, the only light coming from the outside. Naruto got a bit weary, but still took a couple of uneasy steps inside the cave. "Mom? Wendy? Are you here?" The only thing that answered him was a barely concealed giggle and a very low hush. Taking a few more steps, until he reached the farthest illuminated by the outside light, Naruto tried again. "Mom, Wendy, what are you doing here in the dark?" After a brief silence, his answer came in the form of all the lacrima crystals lighting up suddenly. Letting out a gasp, Naruto quickly covered his eyes with his hands, took a step back, tripped on something and proceeded into falling on his butt. Surprise! Before Naruto could open his eyes and fully register what was going on, he was tackled on the ground and enveloped in a crushing hug. "Happy birthday, Naru-ni-chan." 1. Wendy. Gasp. "I can't breathe. ATH. Naruto did his best to inhale the precious air, but found out yet again, 3-year-olds were surprisingly strong. Grandine's laughter came from somewhere above him, but all Naruto could see in his dazed state was a huge white spot in many other colored spots. "I think that's enough, Wendy. We wouldn't want this birthday to be his last now, would we?" At their mother's words, Wendy released her brother from the hug. That didn't mean she stopped her relentless onslaught though. Quickly grabbing his hand, she proceeding into dragging him somewhere, with Naruto barely having the time to catch his breath and somehow scramble to get up on his legs. Now that the spots in his eyes had started fading away, he noticed their small dining table was in there with a large cake on it. In all the rushing, he had missed its absence from the clearing earlier. On the cake, there were 10, now lit, candles. What surprised him even more though, was that the candles were in the shape of 3-pronged kunai. "We didn't know how long the sleeping spell Mom placed on you would last, so we got really early and baked the cake. I helped a lot," Wi explaining, oblivious of the blank, bewildered look her brother had on his face. "Mom then made the candles using her magic and we moved everything here in preparation." Then Mom used another spell to wake you up and she shut all the lighting in the cave when you started approaching. Come on. Wish something and blow them out. Blow them out. Wendy continued excitedly, while she forced Naruto into a chair and pushed the cake in front of him. Don't forget to make a wish. Naruto only proceeded in staring first at his sister, then at his mom, who had moved on the other of the table and was giving him an amused look, then over at Wendy again and finally at the cake. All higher thinking was seized in his mind and a lone thought seemed to be brought up by his short-circuited brain. Today was 10th of October, year 774. 3 years since he had arrived into this world and his 10th birthday. Naruto felt tears looming at the edges of his eyes, but quickly wiped them out and gave his family a huge, toothy grin. Boy, you got me good. I was really surprised, thanks, Wendy. Mom. His little sister only returned a grin of her own and jumped on his chair, before suffocating him in another hug. Make a wish and blow them, come on, I can help if you want, okay, I'll help. Wendy enthusiastically offered as she released her now purple-faced brother and turned towards the cake. Tell me when you made the wish and we'll blow them together. Naruto and Grandine looked at each other, before laughing out loud. The blonde ruffled his sister's hair and looked at the cake. Okay, let's see, what do I want? Well, I have everything I could ever wish for right here, right now, so I don't know. That's no good, Naru-ni-chan. You have to make a wish, it's your birthday. Come on, think of something, so we can blow the candles. Naruto looked at his sister with a neutral expression and quickly started realizing that she was more excited about the candles than the wish. They would probably have to light them a couple of more times afterwards, just in case. He remembered she blew hers around 10 times. In that case, maybe you should wish for things remaining the way they are. Grandine's voice snapped him from his inner thoughts. That's no good, Mom. If he tells us his wish, it won't come true. Wendy pouted at their mom. Well, since Mom was the one that said it, it means technically I never told you. Ready, Wendy. On 3 we blow them away. Wendy's objections were quickly forgotten at the prospects of blowing the candles. Naruto let out a small chuckle at his sister's straightforward mind and made his wish. He then counted to 3 and both children blew the candles. After the ritual repeated itself 5 more times, they proceeded with the presents. Wendy had made him ramen all by herself, with Grandine just observing and helping. A little, not much, just a tiny bit. Naruto remembered he was almost heartbroken when he had realized in this new world ramen probably didn't exist. He initially thought he would have to recreate it, but when he shared his troubles with his mom she immediately told him that it in fact did exist. Naruto would always thank the ramen gods from then on for creating a meal so delicious it existed in all the worlds and universes. After he demolished the contents of the bowl, his family decided to help him in taking care of the cake. They left some of it for dinner and Wendy almost shouted. Now it's your turn. Mom, give Naru-ni-chan his present. The ball of excitement that was the ocean-haired child looked at her mom with stars shining with anticipation and hope. Grandine gave Naruto a knowing look, before winking slightly. They both knew why Wendy was so excited and thought they should tease her a bit. Wendy's right, son. I'm not sure what you'd like though, so we'll do whatever you wish for today. This time the star-filled hopeful gaze was turned towards Naruto. Seeing his sister like that, Naruto almost gave in, but still managed to hold his own. For now. I don't know, Mom. I am kind of tired. Maybe we should just rest today and do nothing. Wendy immediately pouted at her brother. Come on, Naru-ni. That's boring. Let's do something exciting, like flying, playing around, hide and seek, flying. Anything but just sleeping. Naruto couldn't hold his laughter this time and was soon joined by Grandine. You're too cute, Wendy-chan, exclaimed the blonde, hugging his sister, who was all too enthusiastic to return it as well. All right, let's go flying. With the decision made, the little girl let out a happy squeak and increased her hold on her brother's neck. Despite having difficulties breathing, Naruto still joined their mom in another laugh. Shortly afterwards, they picked what was left of the cake and taking the table and chairs as well, went to their clearing. Gamma-chan had been returned to Wendy of course and now the little girl was holding it tightly, while walking next to her brother. All right, Naruto, you prepare some sandwiches for our little trip. Wendy, I want you to go and dress up, as well as prepare clothes for your brother and spares. It can get quite chilly high in the skies as you know and even though I can heal you, I'd rather you children don't get sick in the first place. I'll check the weather in the meantime and chose a destination. Her children happily agreed and went on making the preparations. Grandine looked up and took off in the air. She went a couple of 100 meters up and started surveying the area and feeling the air currents. It seemed like there would be a huge storm coming from north and then proceeding east. They had went west on Wendy's birthday, so south it was then. She was about to descend, before catching something else in air. A strange feeling, as if it was directed towards her. She tasted the air some more and narrowed her eyes, before the feeling grew and turned into a whole message. Grandine almost lost focus and fell from the sky when she realized what it was. For some time, she just flew on one spot, unmoving. She was double, triple and quadruple checking it, to make sure it was true. After she realized there was no doubt from who it came from and what it contained, she looked down at her children, who had already prepared for the trip and were waiting patiently for her to return. Okay. Knowing their hyperactive nature, it probably wasn't that patiently. She started descending slowly. 7th of July, year 777. She had little over 2.5 years. 2 years and 9 months to be precise, Grandine calculated, while she absent-mindedly landed in the clearing. Maybe it was time to start teaching them magic. Wendy was old enough and Naruto looked like he had gotten used to his vast magical power. After she had given him some of her life force and with it some of her magical power as well 3 years ago, it had started growing progressively, even though he was still a child. His daily exercise routine only further helped with that and Grandine knew he would have no trouble becoming an exceptional mage. Wendy herself had shown aptitude for magic and had higher magical power than it was normal for children her age as well. The Sky Dragon hadn't started teaching them sooner, because her daughter was too young yet and her son had problems with controlling his magic. He was a special case after all. You either were born with magical prowess or were not. The only reason he had the ability was because of her own life force in him. Since it wasn't natural to him, Grandine had taught him exercises to draw it out. It was a long and hard process, but finally after 3 years it had started bringing fruition. Of course, that wasn't the only thing she taught him. The language was the first thing, since she didn't want them to constantly be using the telepathy spell and besides, he needed to interact properly with his sister. She had then taught him about the world they were living in, Earthland, as well as some history, the concept of magic, geography, the mage guilds and how they operated, the kingdom of fury, physics and other, boring, things in her so knew how to make them interesting though, so he had at least learnt some of the basics about the world. Mom. Are you all right? Naruto's voice brought her out of the daze she hadn't realized she was in. Grandine looked at her son. We've been calling you for a while now. What's wrong? Nothing, son, don't worry. I was just thinking. About what? Naruto asked as he tilted his head slightly to the right in confusion. Seeing him, Wendy immediately copied the motion. Grandine smiled at her children's antics. Something I think both of you will be very excited about. Now get on. I will tell you on the way. Naruto and Wendy climbed on the Sky Dragon's back and after she made sure they were holding tight, she took off into the air and immediately headed south. Where are we headed, Mom? Wendy asked, barely containing the excitement in her voice. I thought it would be a good idea to go south, to some warmer weather this time. There was a storm coming from the north, which was headed east anyway. Today I'll show you an island with a giant tree on it. A friend of mine showed it to me once, a long time ago. Someday you have to teach me how to read air currents, Mom. It was Naruto that spoke this time. Grandine smiled. How about we start tomorrow then? Brief silence fell. Before, what? Well, you've grown accustomed to magic and Wendy is old enough, so it is the right moment. Grandine chuckled before she continued, I'm going to teach you, Naruto, the battle aspects of my magic and the healing ones to Wendy. Of course, I won't forego either of them completely and will teach you the basics in everything. This is just in case anything happens to me. Then you would be able to teach each other. Naruto's excitement was diminished a bit by that. What do you mean, Mom? Is something wrong? He looked at Grandine suspiciously. Wendy picked up on it and looked at her worriedly. Of course not, my children. I just want you to be prepared just in case. One should expect the unexpected after all. Don't worry about it. Let's enjoy our flight now. If you look really hard, you'll be able to spot the giant tree in the distance. Dismissing their mother's weird behavior for now, both Naruto and Wendy looked at the now fast approaching island. Their eyes widened at the incredible sight that was before them. Grandine stared at the orange light that was slowly growing, signifying the approaching dawn. She let out another drawn-out sigh. This was probably her 20th this morning. She hadn't been able to sleep at all tonight. The reason being, today was the 6th of July, year 777. Naruto would get up soon, to start preparing breakfast and do his morning routine. He would then wake up Wendy, and after they ate, Grandine would teach them magic. That would happen normally though. Today was going to be a bit different. The Sky Dragon decided to let her children sleep in, so she had placed a spell over them. They deserved a break after all, and she wanted to make this day special. The huge dragon started shrinking as it went over the oven. Ramen for breakfast, only this one time. She had made sure both her children ate properly and had made a strict schedule on the consumption of the dish of the gods. She had convinced Naruto that this way, ramen would taste even better when he ate it from time to time rather than constantly. He didn't complain afterwards, especially since the other things Grandine had prepared were delicious as well. The Sky Dragon absent-mindedly recalled the past 2 years and 9 months since she started teaching her children her magic. She had been proud by their ability and thirst to learn more. They had progressed so far. She had also started teaching them each the other part of her magic, healing in Naruto's case and battle in Wendy's. Naruto had even gone beyond that and had thought of a couple of spells of his own. And then, there was his father's techniques as well. Grandine had to admit, Minato Namikaze had certainly been a genius. She had reached that conclusion when Naruto had explained the secrets behind the techniques. She had wondered not once, what would her son's life be like if he wasn't robbed of his chakra and had remained in the elemental nations. He would have certainly become a very important and powerful individual. The Sky Dragon had no doubt her son would do the same here though. He had showed exceptional prowess with her magic, even adapting one of his father's techniques to it. He had worked on it for quite a while, but recently Naruto had said he had almost completed it. He had even said he would teach it to her and Wendy when he was done. Both of them were quite happy at that, even though Grandine already knew how to do it. She had tried it the moment the blonde had explained how it worked, to see if it could be done, but decided to keep it a secret and not spoil his enthusiasm. Truly the destructive power behind that spell could be tremendous. That was her favorite thing about it. If used properly, it could be fatal, but it could also be non-lethal, even though it would inflict a lot of damage. But what amazed her even more were the other techniques. She was sure Naruto would be able to recreate them, even though it would probably take him a long time. He would be making them from scratch after all, with just knowing only the concepts behind them. Unfortunately, she couldn't help him with that. They did sound similar to rune magic though, so she suggested they should seek someone who knew more about it. Mages like that weren't rare, but true masters of the art would be a little harder to find, and that's what he needed. At this point in her thoughts, Grandine realized she had actually almost finished preparing the breakfast. The sun had already risen quite a bit and she decided it was time to wake up her children. But before she could do it, she heard noise from the small house, followed by the appearance of a very excited blonde. "I smell ramen," Naruto shouted as he looked at the cooking pot and practically flew over it. Grandine laughed at her son's antics before catching him in her paw. Now, Naruto, be a bit patient. Wake up your sister, if she already isn't up from all the commotion, and go wash up. Breakfast will be ready by the time you're back." Before she even finished the sentence, the blonde was already in the house and a loud, "Wake up, Wendy. Ramen for breakfast. Whoever washes up first gets an extra serving," was heard. Seconds later both children were scrambling to reach a nearby pond. Grandine shook her head at the scene. Looking at the speed they were running with, she briefly wondered if they were using vernier to go faster. Wendy's desire to copy her brother sometimes had brought a ramen addiction of her own, although not as severe as Naruto's. Even though at first it was just because her brother ate it, later on Wendy had actually started liking the dish quite a bit. The Sky Dragon set the pot on the table and filled 2 bowls. Not long after, both her children came back and attacked their food with vigor. Grandine found the need to remind them she hadn't raised savages and they should keep some table manners. Naruto was the first one to finish his bowl. "Seconds, please," he happily screamed, before giving Grandine a suspicious look. Mom, not that I'm complaining, but what's the reason behind this wonderful breakfast? And how come we overslept?" Grandine laughed at her son. "Well, you both have been working hard lately, so I thought a break was in order. I let you sleep late and prepared your favorite meal as a reward." Knowing her next words would only cause even more excitement, the Sky Dragon continued. "Today seems like it's going to be a good day, so I was thinking maybe we could go for a flight. What do you think?" Her children looked at each other surprised, before they both gave her a huge grin. "Of course, Mom. Let's go right now." Wendy let out a shout full of excitement and went to the house to prepare. Naruto was about to follow her, before an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. He turned to Grandine and asked her a bit worried, "Sure everything's all right?" "Of course, son. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. I just have an uneasy feeling. And besides, you've only taken us flying on special occasions before," no matter how much Wendy asked. "I mean, I'm very happy about this, The blonde trailed off, without finishing. Grandine looked at the boy surprised that he caught on her mood, but said nevertheless. "Don't worry, Naruto. I told you, today is going to be a day off from everything and we'll spend it by having fun, as a family." She gave him a smile. "Now go get dressed or we might leave you behind if you're too slow," she teased him a bit. Naruto didn't need any more incentive and quickly rushed towards the house. The uneasy feeling never left him though. The sun was slowly setting down, revealing a black sky with a few stars already painted on it. In the light of the slowly disappearing orange orb, Sky Dragon Grandine flew towards her home, with her two sleepy children. Today had been quite the exciting day for them. They had gone all over the place, making snowmen at a snowy peak followed by going to the beach in a faraway secluded spot, where Naruto and Wendy had built a masterpiece of a sand castle. They had played various games like tag and hide and seek, and they had even visited the island with the giant tree. In the end, they had all been quite exhausted from their family trip, and Grandine had no doubt they would probably fall asleep the moment they reached home, without even thinking about dinner. As she approached the clearing, instead of landing, Grandine continued towards the cave. She went inside and slowly descended, while carefully moving her children from her back. Wendy had already fallen asleep in Naruto's arms, and the blonde himself looked like he was barely staying awake. "Why are we here, Mom?" he asked, tilting his head slightly to the right, in his trademark confusion pose. "Since we hadn't slept here in a while, I thought we should visit our old cave. The lacrima crystals have been getting lonely, you know." Grandine joked with her son, as she started preparing the blankets for sleep. Yeah, you are right, we haven't slept here in a while. I'm so exhausted I don't think the lights would be a bother at all." Naruto mused, before letting out a yawn. He set Wendy down, before lying next to her. "You know, Mom, we should do this more often. I had a lot of fun today." "I had a lot of fun today as well, son. And judging by how your sister never stopped smiling until she fell asleep, I think we'd be right to say she did too." Grandine smiled at her boy, while lying down next to them. Naruto gave her an amused chuckle. "Oh yeah, definitely right." He paused for a moment, before continuing. "You know, Mom, I'm glad I met you and Wendy-chan. I've never been happier in my life and I really love both of you." Hearing her son, the Sky Dragon barely held a heavy sigh. Instead, she wrapped her children with her tail and brought them a bit closer to her. "I love you too, my son. I love both of you so much," were her last words, before everyone fell asleep. Grandine woke up and opened her eyes. She looked down at her sleeping children, before letting out a heavy sigh. It was a little after midnight. It was time. The Sky Dragon got up and carefully tucked her kids under another blanket. She then started walking slowly towards the entrance of the cave. She briefly stopped, looking one last time at the two sleeping children. Holding her tears, she moved out and continued making her way towards the clearing. When she reached it, she went to the middle, near where the little house was. She sat down and looked up at the stars. The whole sky was illuminated with millions of white dots, that let their small lights fall over her. She was going to miss Naruto and Wendy so much. She could only pray they would be all right. Although, the Sky Dragon had faith in her children's abilities. Naruto would protect Wendy with all his power, and Wendy would always take care of him after one of his reckless endeavors. She only hoped she would see them again someday. Feeling the tears edging in her eyes, Grandine let out another heavy sigh, before getting up. She looked once more at the sky, before stretching her wings in preparation for flying away. "Going somewhere, Mom?" The Sky Dragon almost fell to the ground, startled and completely caught by surprise, by the sudden voice. She looked back, towards the direction of the cave, and saw Naruto holding the hand of a drowsy Wendy, that was still wiping one of her eyes with her hand. "Why are you awake?" Grandine couldn't hold back the anxiety in her voice. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maybe she should have cast a spell on them after all. "I felt you leave earlier and decided to follow you. You've been acting strange the whole day, Mom. Every time you looked at us, you would get a faraway look and all of your smiles were kind of sad," the blonde explained. "The only time you acted this weird was on Naru-ni-chan's 10th birthday when you said you'd teach us magic. Mom, are you okay? What's going on?" It was Wendy that asked her this time. Grandine almost cursed. Almost. In truth, she was actually quite proud of her children for realizing something was wrong. You had to be quite observant to catch her deception. Then again, her emotions had been running rampart the whole day and she probably didn't do the best job at concealing them. The Sky Dragon gave out another sigh. "I have to go, my children. There is something that needs to be done and because of that, I have to leave." Both of them tilted their heads to the right, before Naruto asked, "What do you need to do, Mom? And where are you going? When are you going to be back?" I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I'm not allowed. And it's too soon for you to know as well." Grandine paused for a bit, feeling her heart tightening. "I don't know when I'll be back." "Can't you take us with you, Mom? We can help you with whatever it is you're going to do." Naruto tried, hope filling his speech and eyes. Grandine shook her head. "I'm sorry, Naruto. It's too dangerous for you yet." But we are strong, Mom. And we'll get stronger, I promise. Please, take us with you, please." The Sky Dragon closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, son. So you're going to abandon us?" Wendy said dejectedly, with tears streaming from her eyes. "No." Grandine roared, suddenly opening her eyes. She went to her children and enveloped them in a hug, nuzzling them to her nose. "I'll never abandon you, my sweet, wonderful, beautiful children. I will always be with you, in your hearts, wherever you go. I wish I could stay here with you, to continue teaching you magic, to continue telling you stories, to continue playing together. I wish I could take you with me." Tears started falling from the dragon's eyes. Both Naruto and Wendy were a bit startled at that. Since all their time together with their mother, they had never once seen her cry. Grandine herself couldn't remember the last time she did as well. She could handle leaving them without a word, but seeing them sad and dejected like that, with tears in their eyes only made it harder for her already breaking heart. "I'm so sorry. Everything will be clear by the day we meet once more. Promise me you will become strong and you will take care of each other, so we can meet again one day." After looking at his sister a bit, Naruto spoke. "All right, Mom. I promise we will get stronger and we will look for you until we find you. Nothing will stop us until the day we meet again and you explain everything to us. Then, you will let us help you with whatever you are doing." He paused for a bit and placed his hand on Wendy's shoulder, before looking Grandine straight in the eyes. "It's a promise of a lifetime." Wendy looked at her older brother and wiped her tears away. She looked into her mom's eyes as well. "It's a promise." Sky Dragon Grandine saw the determination filling her children's gazes and despite the sad moment a huge smile was spread on her face. "All right, it's a promise." She held them close for a while longer. "Go. It is time I go." Both Naruto and Wendy released her as well, before taking a few steps back and giving her a small nod. Naruto took Wendy's hand and they both looked at their mother, as she went to the center of the clearing. Grandine turned towards them one last time as she slowly started ascending in the air. But before she could say anything, Naruto held up his hand, with his palm opened in front of him. "Mom, before you go, I want to show you something. I was going to show you during the trip, but we were having such a good time, I left it for when we would start training again. But now that, well, I think you might be able to use this." Wind started gathering around him before concentrating at his outstretched palm. The first step is rotation. The trick behind it is not only rotating in one direction, but several directions at once. Naruto started explaining, as the wind in his hand started moving and rotating all over, as it took the shape of a small orb in the middle. The next step is adding power, which can be done by increasing the force and speed of the wind significantly, he continued, as the orb started growing. Even though she was a bit far, Grandine could feel the strength of the wind, as well as the velocity, picking up. The final product of this phase was a larger orb, emanating waves of air from within. The last step is combining the two and compressing the power and speed of the wind, concentrating it on one area. As he said that, he furrowed his brows in effort. Slowly the wind waves that were coming out of the swirling sphere started getting smaller and smaller, until they were completely packed into the now perfect orb. Unlike his father's technique, which glowed and was blue, because of the chakra, this one was completely transparent and you could only see a distortion in the space above his hand, with the violent air currents rotating around one point. Wendy's eyes widened at the sight. "You finished it, Naru-ni-chan?" Naruto just nodded, before letting the spell disperse, followed by the breath he was holding. "I call it Sky Dragon's Spiraling Orb. The name is a bit different than the one my father placed on it. But I decided to change it, since the techniques aren't exactly the same either. I hope this will help you out until we meet again, Mom." Grandine smiled at her boy, not hiding her pride and happiness in the slightest. "Thank you, son. I've always known you would be able to accomplish it. I will try it out the first chance I get." Grandine looked at the moon and sighed, before turning once again to her children. "Goodbye, Naruto, Wendy. Until the day we meet, stay safe, become stronger and take care of each other. I love you so very much, my dear, wonderful, precious children." Those were Grandine's last words, before she turned into an orb of light and sped somewhere into the night sky. Unable to hold herself any longer, Wendy let out a cry as she started sobbing. Naruto kneeled down and grabbed his little sister into a hug, which she immediately returned. He looked up at the star-filled sky, at the direction Grandine had disappeared to. "Goodbye, Mom. We are lost, aren't we?" Wendy asked with an innocent voice. Naruto gulped. "No, we are not. I know exactly where we are. But Naru-ni-chan, this is the third time we pass by that white and red tree over there. Maybe it's a very common tree for this area." Not giving up, Naruto tried to find an explanation. "It has the same burn mark on one side as the other two. And every other type of tree around here has a brown bark." Naruto started sweating a bit. Okay, so maybe we are a little lost." Wendy let out a sigh. Today was the 8th of August and it had been a month since they had left the clearing and their small house. They had decided in order to get strong, they should join a mage guild. They would also try to look for other dragons, in case one of them could tell them why their mom left. The problem was, navigating through the forest and paths down the mountain proved to be quite the challenge. Not to mention her brother's navigational skills seemed to be non-existent. What was worse, Wendy's own navigational skills were probably on the same level. So they had been stuck in this forest for the past 4 days. "Don't worry, Wendy-chan, I'm sure we'll find our way out. If worse comes to worse, I'll just blast the whole forest away." Naruto reassured his sister, gaining an evil smirk at the end. "How about we make a camp here and rest for now? I'll go find us something to eat." Wendy thought about it a bit, before nodding. It was the late afternoon and they had been walking for a long while, so she was quite tired. They really should rest for now and maybe tomorrow they would have more luck. They removed their backpacks and Naruto started setting up the tent, while Wendy was looking for dried wood. After everything was set and there was a warm fire in their small camp, Naruto looked up at Wendy. "Okay, Wendy, I'll go catch us something. Don't worry, I won't go far. If anything happens, just call my name." His sister nodded slightly, but asked, "But Naru-ni-chan, how are you going to find your way back? You are good at getting lost." Naruto smiled at her and took off a knife. "I'll just mark some of the trees on the way. I wouldn't get lost this way, even I'm not that hopeless." Wendy returned the smile and sat down in front of the fire. She grabbed a stick and started poking the burning twigs in it. Her thoughts inadvertently went to Grandine's departure and their current predicament. She was still quite hurt by it and couldn't help feeling abandoned. If it wasn't for her brother, she didn't know what she was going to do. Wendy knew he was feeling pain as well, but he hid it and kept smiling, just to reassure her and keep her spirits up. The ocean-haired girl shook her head at her brother's actions. When he came back, she would hug him and thank him. But she would also tell him that she was all right as well and he didn't need to hide his true feelings in himself. If he could be strong for her, then she was going to be strong for him. And they did promise Grandine they would find her one day, so things were going to get better. Smiling at her thoughts, Wendy looked up to see one of the bushes shuffling. Not realizing how much time had passed, she thought her brother was quite speedy at catching dinner. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her how hungry she actually was, so she decided to be grateful for his haste. That was fast, Naru-ni-chan. You're a pretty good hunter, what did? Wendy trailed off, when she saw that it wasn't her brother that came out of the bushes. Naruto was walking back to their camp, while whistling a happy, carefree tune. Or at least that's what he was trying to do. Under the weight of the deer on his shoulders, it came out a bit strained and drawn out. He could drag his catch on the floor, he supposed, but he hadn't had descent exercise ever since they got lost in this damn forest, so he considered this training. It was the same reason he went after something larger this time, as opposed to the usual hares he caught the previous days. He had initially thought deer would be harder to catch. There was also the fact, Grandine had taught them they shouldn't only eat rabbit meat, since it was low on fat and some nutrients. In truth, Naruto wasn't much of a hunter. He supposed it was a pretty hard job, that would require lots of patience, skill, and the right tools and knowledge for most people. Most people didn't know Sky Dragon magic though, since he wasn't the patient type either, rather the jump head on and hit them until they stop moving type. He just used his enhanced sense of smell to locate his prey and cast Vernier to increase his speed. Of course, that wasn't always enough to catch hares, since they were quite speedy themselves. But he would employ different tactics each time. One way was to try and catch them head-on, which was really hard, since they were able to make very fast turns and easily avoid things like trees, so he considered this turning practice. Since there was the issue of bending down to grab them, which improved his balance as well. Another way was a stamina battle. He would just chase the hare until it was exhausted or slowed down enough for him to just catch it. After all, not even a wild animal can keep top speed for a longer duration. Of course, he couldn't keep Vernier for too long periods either, so it was a race. And the final one, when he was really in a hurry, he would use another spell. He called Air Explosion to stun or daze the hare. It didn't have a large range, so he had to do it while running, which was quite hard sometimes, especially since he also had to dodge trees. But if it hit anywhere near the running creature, it was his victory. Deers were a lot simpler. Well, they were quite speedy themselves, but they were also bigger than rabbits, so they weren't as good at making rapid turns. And since he didn't want to keep Wendy waiting for too long, he just quickly used Air Explosion and disabled the animal. Naruto finally returned at the camp, but was surprised at what greeted him. Wendy was sitting in front of the fire, but she wasn't alone. Next to her sat a boy, most likely around his age. He had blue spiky hair and brown eyes, but what caught Naruto's attention was a reddish marking across his right eye, which started from the base of his hairline and reached his jaw. The boy was wearing a short-sleeved jumpsuit, colored black at the top and white at the bottom, with a white collar. His sleeves had a large white hem, which was connected with the collar by a thin white line. On the sides, there were two big red lines, which started at the base of his ribs and finished at his upper tights. He wore a brown belt with a golden buckle around his waist, and the leggings of his jumpsuit were tucked into a pair of brown ankle-high boots. On the ground next to him, there was a large traveler's backpack, with a rolled sleeping bag on it and a wooden staff with a bandaged circle at the top strapped to it. Naruto tensed when he saw the blue-haired boy reach for it, but before he could drop the deer and prepare for battle, he had to try and hold his ground at Wendy's tackle. Naru-ni-chan. What took you? Look who I found. This is Gerard. He is lost in the woods, like us. Gerard decided not to correct the girl on who found who, instead he just observed their appearance. Naruto had blonde spiky hair, the same length as his, and bright cerulean eyes. What caught Gerard's attention was the whisker marks below his eyes, 3 on each cheek. He was wearing a bright orange t-shirt, with what looked like blue wing motifs around the base, with 2 wings extending up to his chest. He had the same motifs on the hem of the sleeves as well. He wore forest green baggy pants, with 2 large pockets at his ankles. The base of his leggings were bandaged and went into a pair of blue sandals. Gerard noticed a hunting knife was sticking from one of the pockets, but other than that there wasn't any other weaponry on him. Which posed the question, how was he able to catch a deer without any proper equipment? Wendy on the other hand had short, straight, ocean blue hair and brown eyes. She wore a white buttoned shirt with a red collar and yellow sleeves. She had the same wing motifs on her chest as Naruto's and also wore a pair of blue pants, giving the impression the wings were extending from them. On her feet, she wore a pair of black shoes. Realizing this was the older brother the girl had spoken of, Gerard relaxed, stood up and approached the bickering siblings. Wendy, please, I'll drop the deer. Let me go so we can prepare it and you can hug me later. The little girl let go of her brother with a huff and looked away while puffing her cheeks. That was mean, Naru-ni. Naruto felt bad, seeing his sister's reaction, even though she looked adorable. Sorry, Wendy, you were right. I was just caught off guard and didn't want to drop our dinner. She immediately gave him a huge grin, which let him know he wasn't in trouble anymore. Naruto looked on at the approaching boy and placed the deer on the ground. The newcomer extended his arm. Hi, I'm Gerard. Naruto showed him a large grin and took his arm. Naruto, thanks for keeping my sister company and away from trouble while I was hunting. Gerard couldn't help himself, but smiled back at the blonde. Even though they didn't look alike at all, from their grins he could tell they were siblings. It was no problem at all, she is a very sweet and cute girl. His words prompted a crimson blush from Wendy, who tried to hide it behind one of her brother's legs. Said brother let out a laugh when he saw her embarrassed like that and looked again at Gerard. Have you eaten anything? Join us for dinner, it's the least we can do as thanks. The other boy shook his head. No, I wouldn't want to impo. Seeing where things were going, his stomach decided to voice its opinion on the matter with an audible grumble. Naruto couldn't help himself and laughed again at the now blushing and embarrassment boy. I think someone disagrees with you. Come on, it's no problem at all, the more the merrier. Finally giving in, Gerard nodded and started helping in the preparation of the deer. He gave them some herbs and vegetables he had picked while he was wondering which would make their meal all the more delicious. After a while, they had sat around the fire and had begun eating. Feeling restless, Naruto decided to break the silence. So Gerard, tell us more about you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Gerard looked confused at the blonde, but I already did. Hearing that, Wendy laughed. Not like that, silly. Here, like this. My name is Wendy Marvell. I'm 5 years old and my birthday is on the 9th of September. My likes are my brother, my mother, ramen and sky dragon magic. My dislikes are dried plums and being left out. My hobbies are learning sky dragon magic with my Naru-ni-chan and plants. My dream is to become a strong mage so I can one day find my mom, the sky dragon Grandine. Gerard didn't have the time to be shocked, because it was Naruto's turn to speak. My name is Naruto Marvell, I'm 12 years old and my birthday is on the 10th of October. My likes are the same as my sister's, except I like her instead of myself. Naruto chuckled a bit. My dislike is waiting for the time it takes to prepare ramen. My hobbies and my dream are the same as my cute, little sister's. He patted Wendy on the head, who in turn jumped next to him and hugged him, hiding her blush in the process. After a while, Gerard found his voice. You two are dragon's children? Well, Grandine adopted us when we were younger, since we didn't have any parents. But she is still our mother by all but blood. Naruto explained. Gerard nodded. So you two are mages. That explains how you were able to catch that deer without any hunting equipment. Both of them just smiled and Wendy said, now it's your turn. Well, my name is Gerard. I'm 12. Well, I guess I'm 13 years old now. Both the Marvells tilted their heads to the right at his words. Oh yeah, they were definitely siblings. Same mannerisms and that ramen addiction? The blue-haired boy continued with an amused smile. My birthday is today, on the 8th of August. The siblings were shocked for a moment, before Wendy screamed and tackled Gerard in a hug. Happy birthday, Gerard. Why didn't you say so sooner? And you were thinking of not joining us and spending it alone? Wendy gave him a pout, which told Gerard he was somehow in trouble. Luckily, Naruto decided to save him. You know, I'm starting to see a pattern here. My birthday is on the 10th of October, Wendy's is on the 9th of September and Gerard's is on the 8th of August. He said, placing his hand on his chin in a thinking manner. Wendy replaced her pout with the same thoughtful expression. And Mom had to leave on the 7th of July, it is weird. Gerard was curious about the weird coincidence as well, but another question was brought to his mind. What happened with your mother? The Marvells looked down at his question. Why hair eyes? She had to leave for somewhere and couldn't tell us where, why or when she'd be back. Naruto then looked up with a regained grin and full of determination, he said, but we promised we would become stronger and find her one day. So we are looking for a mage guild right now. Right. Wendy nodded with the same determination and conviction in her voice. Gerard smiled. Well, I'm a wandering mage as well. How about we travel together and maybe look for a guild? The siblings looked at each other briefly, then back at him, with huge grins on their faces. Sure. A week and a half had passed since Naruto, Wendy and Gerard had started traveling together. They had managed to navigate their way out from the forest. Well, technically, they were still in it, but they weren't lost anymore, since they had found a path. They didn't know where it led, but hopefully where there was a road, there would be a town at each end. In the past weeks, Naruto and Wendy had become good friends with Gerard. He had told them he didn't have any parents so they could relate to him in a way. He hadn't shown them any of his magic, but they didn't ask that much, figuring it was offensive and he needed to keep himself ready if anything were to happen. Gerard possessed some really good survival skills and had shown them how to make traps to catch animals. In the end though, Naruto still opted to use his magic, since he regarded it as training. He had a couple of hand-to-hand spars with Gerard as well and was amazed at how skilled the other boy was. Truthfully, he had needed a sparring partner for a long time now. You could only get so far by yourself and for obvious reasons he couldn't spar with Grandine or Wendy. Naruto and Wendy were telling a story to Gerard about one of their trips on which they came upon a giant man-eating plant that had almost devoured Wendy, when the little girl suddenly said, "Hey, Naru-ni-chan, isn't that the same tree we passed by right before we met Gerard?" Naruto and Gerard looked at where Wendy was pointing at and their eyes widened in surprise. Said tree was actually quite an interesting species, one that neither of them had ever seen before. Its bark was white with red lines of varying width and the leaves themselves were actually black. Had they not been lost before, Naruto and Wendy would have actually looked closer at it and examined it more thoroughly. Yeah, it does actually look like it's the same one. Strange. It seems I was right, Wendy, it is a common tree of the area. Naruto teased his sister, who huffed and said, "Let's go check it out, maybe there's something strange about it." Not wanting to let this round go to her brother, she started walking towards it, followed by an amused Naruto and a smiling Gerard. "Hey, Naru-ni-chan, look, it has the same burn mark and it kind of looks like a fox's head." Naruto raised a brow. "Really? Hey, you're right," Gerard said as he looked at the three. "And these 9 lines around its head kind of look like tails, don't you think?" At his statement, both Naruto and Wendy froze suddenly and the blonde went to inspect the burn mark more thoroughly. The first thing he noticed, it wasn't actually a burn mark, but rather an ink one. At its base, it had the face of a fox. From below it 9 lines started extending around it, 4 on each side and 1 coming from behind, until they pointed at a black circle, which was positioned right above the fox's forehead. 9 tails. Naruto whispered, although it was heard by both Gerard and his sister. The silence of the forest was suddenly broken by a multitude of colorful curses, that would have no doubt brought a blush on the faces of most people, coupled with the wrath of many mothers for their exposure to the world. They originated from a girl, no more than 15 years old, dressed in a red jumpsuit, who was sitting at a small camp, near the entrance of the ruins of an ancient pyramid. "Fuck. I hate bugs. I hate spiders. I hate all those crawling fuckers. I hate this forest and I hate this goddamn job. Why the fuck were we sent? We did nothing wrong to deserve this." The girl continued her tirade of complaints and obscenities. "Because we are most suitable for it, considering our magical abilities. Not to mention our magic also allows us to travel at a faster pace, so we could finish the mission as soon as," answered an amused boy, a year older at most, before he was interrupted. Soon, we've been here for 2 weeks, 12 days. I'm sick of eating wild animals," the girl continued, unfazed by her companion's comments. "There's plenty of fruit around. I haven't taken a proper bath in even longer, because we got lost in this damn forest in the beginning. I can smell myself, which is fucking disgusting. Hey, maybe that's why you're attracting all those bugs." The boy could barely hold his laughter at this point. If looks could kill, the glare the girl sent him would have pierced him repeatedly in many awkward and uncomfortable places for the maximum output of pain. "Fuck. You? Why aren't those damn hell spawns making your life miserable anyway? Oh, you smell way too much for them to even notice me." This time he let out a hearty laugh, before being smacked in the nose by a big rock, which caused him to fall backwards. "I'm gonna kill you," snarled the one that threw it, as she began choking the poor boy. Inchostro. Gasp. Enough. I give. Sorry, smell, nice. The girl, now known as Inchostro, snorted and let go of his neck. Pick yourself up and let's get back to work. I swear, if I have to spend one more night with those fucking blooders, I'm going to start killing shit, and guess who's on top of the list? She stood up and started turning towards the entrance. You don't even have blood, you psychotic, protested the boy, but his response came in an accidental kick in the ribs while she was walking over him. He lay on the ground for a while, clutching his chest, with a bit of blood trickling from his nose from the first hit. Despite his battered state, he couldn't help but smile. That girl was just too much fun sometimes. He was sure if she wasn't here, he'd have probably gone insane himself. Papier. If you don't bring your damn ass here right now, I'm going to make sure you won't be able to sit for a week, after the beating I'm going to deliver upon it. Papier found himself on his feet and rushing towards the entrance, without the need of his brain to even properly send the right command. He briefly wondered if sometimes maybe the bird-sized mosquitoes weren't better. On the other hand, he did kind of deserve it, for infuriating even more an already enraged female. It was still worth it, he muttered, followed by a small chuckle. After lighting 2 torches, the teens disappeared in the darkness of the pyramid. Silence fell after Naruto's words. He ran his fingers over the mark, and the more he looked at it, the more the uneasy feeling in his gut grew. There was no doubt in his mind. The stupid fox was behind this. He now understood something he should have realized sooner. 7 years. Nine Tails had been in this world for almost 7 years. What had it been doing? What had it been up to? Even though Naruto knew it wasn't the one responsible for the attack over the village, he also knew the fox was still a demon. What did it do with all its freedom? Look, Naru-ni, there's another tree over there as well. Naruto looked up, and indeed, there was. If he strained his eyes a bit, he could spot another one in the distance as well. Wendy, stay here with Gerard, while I go see what this is about, Naruto said hastily, but before he could start running, he was grabbed by his sister. No, I won't let you go alone, Wendy, let go. It might be too dangerous for you. That's why I won't, I'll come with you. I can help, I won't let you leave me as well. Naruto froze at her words and looked at his sister. He noticed there were tears threatening to fall from her brown eyes, but he also noted they were filled with determination as well. Determination not to lie. Bent on one knee and quickly hugged her. I'm sorry, Wendy. I won't leave you, I promise. We'll find Mom together, won't we? The girl had now buried her head in Naruto's chest, but still nodded. Gerard decided it was time he intervened. What's going on? Who's Nine Tails? Naruto looked up and responded. The nine-tailed demon fox. It is a very powerful demon that was sealed in a child almost 13 years ago. And it was released almost 6 years ago. I've had dealings with it before, and I need to find out what this is about. Gerard nodded, although he realized the blonde was not telling him the whole story. He dismissed it for now. Let us come with you, Naruto. If something happens, we can help. 3 is better than 1 after all. The blue-haired boy tried to expostulate. Naruto bit his upper lip for a moment, but agreed, all right, let's go. Let's keep close and try to move silently. The other 2 nodded, and they all began following the trail of marked trees. They started off slowly, since they didn't want to make too much noise, but they had begun picking up the pace at one point. Gerard wasn't too happy about it, but he didn't say anything. The blonde had unconsciously been moving faster, a strange urgency coming off from his determined stride, which made the blue-haired boy stay quiet for now. He also noted Wendy would look at him worriedly from time to time, but say nothing as well. There was something more personal involved, and Gerard had started getting an uneasy feeling himself. The tense atmosphere had only served to increase it even more, since no one had initiated any form of conversation since they began following the trail of marked trees. As the pace kept increasing, Gerard realized he could not let things continue like that. He moved towards the blonde, placed a hand on his shoulder, halting him, and was the first to break the silence. Naruto, calm down. Gerard looked in the blue eyes and slightly shifted his own towards Wendy, before turning them back. The other boy looked at his little sister and realized what Gerard meant. Even though she was giving it her best not to show, the ocean-haired girl was taking big breaths, as she had begun getting tired from moving this fast. Naruto almost hit himself. He started putting the uneasy feelings away, as he was calming down. He nodded at Gerard, before going over to Wendy and kneeling down. Let's take a bit of a break, shall we? Lunchtime has passed, so I think we should eat. Naruto smiled and placed a hand on her head, patting her gently. The little girl shook her head slightly. I can still go on, Naru-ni-chan. Don't worry, Wendy. It's not like the trees will start walking on their own now, right? We can follow them after we eat and rest for a bit. There's plenty of time before it gets dark. This time Wendy nodded and immediately sat on the ground. Naruto and Gerard took their big backpacks off and started taking out the leftovers from last night's dinner. The blonde had caught another deer, so they had plenty of meat left. Gerard had even woken up early in the morning and had gone picking up various fruits from around the forest. They started having lunch, but the blue-haired boy observed Naruto was getting restless again. No doubt, the worrying thoughts from before were plaguing him again. Deciding he should break yet another tense silence, Gerard asked. So how do you know this demon? You said you have had dealings with it before. Gerard trailed off, looking at the blonde expectantly. Naruto swallowed the food he had in his mouth and took a deep breath. It attacked my village on the night I was born. Our village leader gave his life away and was able to defeat it and seal it away. But almost 7 years ago, something happened and it was released. He paused for a bit and took another breath. I had forgotten about it until I saw that mark. Gerard nodded. It made sense, although there was still something more. Something more personal. From the way you're acting, I'm guessing it did something specifically to you? Wendy looked at her brother, with worry in her eyes, as he responded, My birth parents died on that night. I was an orphan, until Grandine took me in and gave me a family. Love and a cute little sister. Naruto explained. As he put his hand on said sister's head, she immediately went to him and grabbed him in a hug. Gerard found only more questions pop in his head. But how was it released? And how did you find out? Naruto remained silent for a bit, biting his upper lip in thought, until finally, it's a long story. Let's continue and I promise, I'll tell you after we find out what's going on. The blue-haired boy nodded and stood up. All right. He started packing what was left of their lunch in his backpack, but before he done it on, he went over to Naruto, who was busy with his and placed a hand on his shoulder. The blonde looked at him quizzically. Naruto, don't worry too much and try to calm down. You are not alone in this, we will support you however we can. Besides, we're friends aren't we? In truth, Gerard himself had started enjoying the Marvel's company ever since they began traveling together. He wasn't sure how it happened, but he could be at ease around the siblings, despite the suffocating mission he had over his head. Seeing the usually smiling boy this tense and his equally cheerful sister so worried, made him want to bring their usual demeanors back. Naruto for his part stared, a bit shocked at the other boy. He realized this was the first friend he had made. He did have some kind of connection with Sasuke in the elemental nations, but it was nothing like this. He visibly relaxed and gave Gerard a huge smile. Yeah. He hit him slightly on the shoulder, not strong enough to cause any serious damage. Thanks, Gerard. He wasn't sure what was waiting ahead, but whatever it was, he wasn't alone. He had his sister and his friend, who would help him no matter what. After he was also hugged and thanked by Wendy, the older boy smiled at the Marvels. Let's go. Inchostro had the sneaking suspicion today was going to be fruitless as well. Which only served to infuriate her more. 12 days. They had spent 12 days in this forsaken pyramid, looking for inscriptions, markings or anything related to some damn ritual. And that's not counting the first 4 days they got lost in the damn forest, just because Papier dropped the map, while they were crossing a river. To avoid getting lost again, she decided to mark the 3s, so they would have a clear way back. That was not the issue though. They were told it was going to be an easy mission. Go in, find what they needed, make a copy, get out. Nothing to it, right? No one had mentioned though that the pyramid extended underground as well and was full of so many chambers. What did those ancient people need so many rooms for in a pyramid anyway? Of course, they had discovered there was more of it underneath after some time. The first 4 days were spent on the upper levels, going over them twice even, because they were unable to find anything. It was by sheer luck, they found out there was more of the ancient building underneath, when she had accidentally fallen through a hole. After she had gotten rid of all the centipedes and spiders that crawled all over her body, while she was screaming in surprise and shock, they had continued their search. Not before Papier had made a smart-ass remark that she should have just used her magic of course. And definitely not before she hit him several times, throwing him in the nest of insects so he would use his magic. After that little amusement was over, they proceeded to go down level by level. In truth, they had found many inscriptions, etchings and paintings depicting various rituals, but none of what they were looking for. At least she hoped so. If it turned out they had passed by what they were looking for by mistake, Inchostro was certain she would raise the whole thing down, after they made the copy of course. She didn't want after all this time their mission to end as a failure. THT mindedly entered another chamber and started scanning the walls. After the third lower level, they had realized the size of the floors as well as the number of chambers had increased quite a bit. So they had decided the best course of action was to split up, to cut their time in half. And yet it had still taken them so much time, without providing any results. With their luck, the thing they were looking for would probably be in the last chamber on the last floor. Maybe they should have started there. Inchostro wasn't that worried at being alone actually. She had confidence in her own strength and she knew she was a very powerful mage. With all his joking and goofy personality, the girl was also certain when it came to it. Papier was quite the fighter as well. He could probably even give her a run for her money, which wasn't that surprising. You had to be strong to join their guild after all, that much had been made clear from the beginning. The teenage girl was actually hoping there would be ancient mummies or monsters around. She would be able to finally vent off all the pent-up frustration. So far though, nothing more than a couple of larger spiders had attacked her, which she disposed of with relative ease. Busy with her thoughts, Inchostro finished scanning all the walls of this chamber. She lowered the torch slightly and let out a defeated sigh. This was the last room from this corridor. In total, there were 2 large corridors, with 4 smaller ones branching from each of them. This was the third of the smaller ones, which meant she had 1 more left, before she would be done with her side. If Papier didn't find anything on his half, that would mean they needed to go down to the final level, which was at least 2 times larger than the previous one. The teenage girl made her way out of the room and towards the last corridor, when she heard a distant yell. Inchostro. She immediately livened up. Since the corridors were pretty empty and they were the only ones here anyway, they had just decided they would scream if someone found anything. Papier calling her meant one of 2 things. He either got attacked or came upon their objective. Whichever it was didn't matter though, either would make the 15-year-old extremely happy. With a small smile creeping on her face, Inchostro started running towards where the scream came from. She was hoping this was not one of Papier's jokes, for his sake as well. She didn't want to explain the accident that would occur if it was. As the girl entered the chamber her companion was at, her eyes immediately widened in shock. This room was 2 or even 3 times bigger than all the other ones. At the far end there was an altar carved from stone in a peculiar shape, Inchostro came to associate with the style the ancient people used, and in front was a wide circle. Papier was standing in the middle of it and as the girl approached him, she noticed there were numerous markings on the floor around the circle, which actually turned out to be surrounded by a pentagram. She also noticed there were a lot of markings on the wall behind the altar, with an occasional depiction of what looked like the painted floor. This is it. The boy smiled at her. Finally found it. Inchostro looked around the whole thing again. Whoa, this is huge. What do we copy exactly, the floor or the walls? I think everything is part of the ritual. The pentagram is for the summoning and the explanations are on the walls. That's a lot. What did those ancient people do with something like this anyway? And what type of ancient language is that? I don't remember encountering it before. The girl trailed off, while looking over the markings. Nervat or something. The boy shrugged. I didn't pay much attention to that part of the explanation. In any case, this shouldn't take us too much time to copy. The sooner we are done, the sooner we can be on our way so you can finally get some peace and a shower. Ah, I didn't know you cared so much for my well-being. The girl smiled slightly as she put her hands on the floor. Black liquid started oozing from them, before they started covering the lines and symbols of the pentagram. I care about myself and the best thing for me right now is to be away from you for a while. I don't want to come to the attention of one of your outbursts again. Inchostro glared at him. Like you didn't deserve it. The floor is ready, I'll start with the wall, she said as she stood up. When she passed by Papier, she didn't miss the opportunity to smack him lightly on the back of his head. Not even commenting on the exchange, the boy just jumped on top of the altar and made a few hand signs. He stretched his hands over the pentagram, before paper came from them, covering it completely. He waited for a while, until he moved his hands and lifted the large piece of paper from the ground. Now on it, there was an exact copy of the markings on the floor. He let it float and moved onto the wall. When he was finished with it as well, he joined the two large pieces together and turned to his companion. "Is the ink dry?" The girl merely waved a hand at the floating paper. "It is now." Nodding, the boy made another hand sign, making the paper roll over and then shrink into a small scroll. He went over and grabbed it. Sweet. Mission accomplished. Inchostro just smiled. Finally. Let's get out of here. I can't wait to get a hot bath. After 3 hours of walking, Naruto, Wendy and Gerard finally reached the final tree. The marked path had led them to a clearing, with the ruins of a large, ancient pyramid in the center. They could see 2 tents near the entrance and the remains of a small campfire. No one seemed to be around, so they guessed the owners of the camp were probably inside the pyramid. Gerard looked over to Naruto. "What now?" The blonde thought for a bit, before answering. "Well, we can either search the camp for any clues or just wait for someone to show up and see what we are dealing with." As if he was heard, right when he finished the sentence, voices started coming from the entrance of the pyramid. The 3 children quickly moved back into the forest and hid in the bushes. 2 people came out of it, a boy and a girl. The boy was probably no more than a few years older than Naruto and Gerard. He was fair-skinned, with short, dark green, spiky hair with white strands at places. His face was angular with a pointed nose and dark green eyes. He had a silver earring in the shape of a 4-pointed star hanging from his left ear. He wore a short-sleeved beige jacket over a white tank top, framing his muscular chest and stomach. On his legs, he had short camouflage pants with 2 big pockets on the sides and a pair of beige boots on his feet. Their eyes turned to the girl, who stretched and yelled, "Yes, finally I can get out of this annoying jumpsuit." The moment she said that, the red garment turned into some sort of black liquid and started moving all over her body. The boy let out a laugh. "Ah yes. Even though you are psychotic at times, I have to admit you have a good taste in clothes." She turned to him with a smirk. "Pervert." The liquid had stopped moving and had taken the shape of her new clothing. Both Naruto's and Gerard's eyes widened a bit. The girl was probably around the age of her companion, had pale skin and long black hair, tied into 2 curly pigtails, with the edges of the left being red and the right purple. She had red eyeshadow and her eyes were outlined with black eyeliner that extended a bit upwards from the edges. She had a small nose and her lips were painted with black lipstick. Her clothing consisted of a red, short tank top, with a black scale design over her small chest and a tight red, white and black striped skirt. On her legs she had black and white socks with red ribbons at the top and a pair of black, platform high-heeled boots. The Marvels and Gerard noticed she had 4 tattoos over her body. They were able to make out the first one as big wings on her back, even though they were partially covered by the tank's what looked like a tail, coming from under her skirt and circling down her left tight and disappearing into her sock. The third one was a barbed wire design, going all over her right arm. They also briefly noted she had an elbow-length fingerless glove with the same black and white stripes as her socks. But the final tattoo was what caught the most of their attention. It was on her exposed stomach and it was the same mark as the one on the trees, with her belly button being in the center of the black circle. The girl's companion looked her over as well. "All right, let's pack our things and get going," he said, while tossing the scroll he had in the air, before catching it back. "Watch it. I don't want to have to come back to make another copy of that room, because you lost that thing like you lost our map." The boy snorted, but nevertheless stopped playing with the scroll. "Are you going to turn the trees back to normal?" The girl seemed to be thinking over it for a moment, before she responded, "Nah, they're better looking like this anyway. Besides, it would take some time to stop at each tree and I." She trailed off before turning around quickly at the bush the Marvels and Gerard were hiding in. "Show yourself." At her words, her companion immediately tensed and looked at their direction as well. Naruto cursed. He looked at Gerard, before the blue-haired boy asked, "So what now? Should we run?" Naruto shook his head. "No, I want to know who they are, what that mark means and what they were doing here." "I think that scroll might be the answer to the last one," Gerard mused. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I think so too. All right, I'll go talk with them. Wendy, I want you to remain here and stay hidden. Don't worry, we'll be all right." He patted her on the head, giving her a reassuring smile. Gerard, can you perhaps sneak around the boy and somehow steal that scroll? Gerard thought it over for a bit, before, yeah, but you have to distract them for a while. If you don't come out, I'll make you. Another warning was heard from the Bonnie girl. After nodding to each other one last time, Naruto stood up and went into the clearing. What the hell? It's just a boy. The green-eyed boy relaxed, but his companion narrowed her eyes. Something was off about the blonde. What are you doing here? She asked, not letting her guard down. The boy just looked at them with his cerulean eyes and answered with a question. What is that tattoo on your stomach? The girl was surprised a bit, but composed herself quickly. Well, aren't you an ill-mannered brat? Why should I answer you? Naruto just glared at her. If you don't, I'll beat it out of you, he shouted, pointing at her. Once again the girl was surprised, but this time she let out a laugh. Really now, short stuff? I'd like to see you try. She gave him an evil smile. Don't call me short, plank chest. The only reason you're taller is because of those weird boots. The girl glared at him. You little brat. Tell you what, I'm going to answer your questions if you manage to land a hit on me. Naruto looked at her suspiciously. Really? I swear on my honor as a mage. But you should worry more about yourself. I'm going to beat that foul mouth of yours up. She looked at her companion. Don't interfere. Naruto didn't need anything more than that. Fast winds that run the heaven. Vernier, he chanted, while the wind picked up around him. It then formed into two small cyclones around his ankles, looking a bit like floating bracelets. His opponent narrowed her eyes a bit. He's a mage. Not only that, but this type of magic felt somehow familiar. She didn't have time to think about it though. The blonde shot at her with an incredible speed. She was barely able to dodge his fist, which slightly brushed her cheek. Fuck, he was too fast, she realized, blocking a follow-up punch. The girl cringed a bit at the force behind it. The brat wasn't holding back either. The pale-skinned girl unleashed a kick of her own, only for Naruto to duck under it and sweep her other leg. Losing her balance, the girl fell on her back. Her eyes widened when she saw the blonde coming down at her with an axe kick. She was barely able to dodge again, rolling over to the left. The girl stood up on her hands and started turning her body violently towards Naruto, with her legs stretched into splits. Naruto made a backflip and looked at his opponent, that had now gotten back on her feet as well. He now noticed her eyes were strangely colored. They were red near the pupil, purple in the center and turned into dark blue at the edges. She was definitely a good fighter and had fast reflexes. Time for a change in tactics. He dashed at her, with a slightly reduced speed this time. As they continued exchanging blows and dodging, he kept going slower and slower. Vernier was still active, he was just holding it back, making her think the spell was getting weaker, and when the time came, Naruto dodged another swiping kick backwards, before preparing to dash at her again. Having realized he had gotten slower, his opponent went for a follow-up roundhouse kick. She was completely caught off guard, when the blonde shot at her with the same speed as when they started and punched her in the cheek, sending her flying backwards a couple of meters. Inchostro stood up and felt something going down her chin. He wiped it out and noticed a black liquid. That boy had actually hurt her, he was going to pay. She looked at him again, preparing to unleash all hell, but noticed surprised the wind bracelets around his legs had disappeared. I win. Now answer my questions. The blonde grinned and pointed at her. The girl gaped at him. Was he serious? She heard laughter behind her and turned towards her companion. He got you good. The kid isn't bad at all. The girl retrieved her jaw from the ground. Fuck off. She then turned towards the expectant blonde and pursed her lips. Damn. 3 questions, short stuff. After that you better make yourself scarce or I'll seriously beat you up. Hey, why only 3? You said you'd answer all my. No, I never specified how many. I'm feeling generous so I'm giving you 3. Now stop complaining or they'd get to 1. She frowned at him and crossed her arms at her chest. Naruto thought it over for a bit and nodded. Who are you and what is that tattoo on your stomach? Inchi. The girl's companion started, but was quickly cut off. Shut it. I promised on my honor, and besides, he's just a kid, what's he going to do about it? Sooner or later people will come to know of us anyway. She turned again towards Naruto. My name is Inchostro Bellatela. That's my partner, Papier Blanche, She pointed at the green-haired boy, who just waved with an amused smile. And this is the mark of our guild. No Volpe. 1. 2 left. Naruto lifted his brows at that. A guild? Was that the work of the stupid fox? What type of guild was it? Are you a dark or a light guild? He asked his second question. Neither. Seeing his confused expression, Inchostro decided to explain. Damn. Why was she being so generous today? We are an independent guild. We aren't registered with a magical council. We don't answer to anyone or follow any rules, but at the same time we don't oppose them. Last one. Naruto thought over her answer and finally, who is your guild master? Inchostro paused for a bit, but answered. The one that hands over assignments is a demon called Leonard. But the real guild master is another demon. The nine-tailed demon fox. Hearing that, the boy immediately glared at